All right, you guys. My name's Chris. I live in North Carolina, and I want to talk to you guys about what's going on here. The reason I'm coming to you like this is because this is an unfolding action. We're about a week out from Hurricane Helene, which turned out to be, who knew, the craziest event of our lifetime, depending on where you live. Now, some people, myself included, were able to get out pretty unscathed with very minimal damage to our house and land and property and animals, etc. Others, however, were not so blessed and not so lucky.
There was a store just behind me. I forget the name of it. Early 1900s. Gone. 19-something 40s bus into the church. This is the creek going here underneath where it's supposed to go into the river. And then you've got United Methodist Church. You've got another church there. I don't know, but I feel like there was a house right there. For sure, that building's completely gone. And this flood's not over yet. This is wild. I'm definitely smelling soil. It smells like deep earth you're digging. And it also has a propane smell. I gotta be careful right here because these are down power lines, but I did hear a crack a minute ago. Got some apples on the tree. Look at the debris. Look at the trees here. This is wild. So I'm thinking this is the southeast side of the hurricane has just come through. We weren't sure if this bridge was going to make it the whole time. But look at this. This is the church, the Methodist church. They got the watershed is coming down both sides of it, splitting it. And then this stuff is deep. I gotta be careful here. That's what my steps were before. Look at this. That's like tongue and groove flooring right there. Tongue and groove material. That means that's like a house. There's buildings that are gone. Trash everywhere. So I'm standing here. This is actually split both ways. It's not supposed to do that. This is definitely major.
So I want to focus on a couple details that I'm seeing about the conversation emerge online, and I'm going to do that while sharing the perspective of a friend of mine who is, I would say, at ground zero, basically where the epicenter of the storm was. Now, when I say the storm, I'm under the impression it's a hurricane. He tells me, after he's able to finally talk, it's more of a rain event than a wind event. He described 100-foot wall surges of sloshing water surging through the mountains, y'all. 100-foot tall tsunami surges through the mountains. Tornadoes that have leveled trees and ripped trees in half, where hundreds of miles of trees are just ripped in half. From a tornado in the mountains, an unprecedented event at the same time as another unprecedented event. So I'll let him tell you, but I wanted to set it up and just introduce the conversation and this conversation we're about to embark on, because I'm about to go over to see him and bring him some supplies, and I'll be sure to update everybody as I do. I'm the type of dude who's a straight shooter, so I'm going to tell it to you like it is. I got to obligatorily say this is not necessarily for all children's ears. Of course, we'll keep our language respectful, but it's more so about the significance of, human biology and the remains of such floating in places that it should not be. So we'll discuss a little bit about the mine, the quartz mine that's nearby, and about the lithium mine that's kind of far away, but that the news and the news cycle is really picking up on. I do believe there is a lot of presumption going on about the uniformity of things. I think there's a lot of rogue agents. I think that I've been told that there's a tremendous amount of human decency, which is encouraging in the whole conversation, and a tremendous lack of federal decency, which is telling in the entire election season. And again, we're not getting into politics in this conversation, but both sides of the conversation, we're dealing with a unique place. This hurricane came up the Gulf. It hit through Florida. It ripped through a bit of Georgia. It ripped through a bit of South Carolina. It ripped through a bit of North Carolina. And when I tell you it ripped through a bit of North Carolina, it was the least likely bit to ever endure or encounter a hurricane or a situation like that. So for me, I didn't think nothing of it, right? I'm setting this up because we're going to go into a conversation that I really want to share with you guys from an Instagram live that I had and a WhatsApp video call that I had from my buddy just last night, who was finally able to get to me because some rich millionaire flew in on his private helicopter and dropped off Starlinks. Presumably it was a rich millionaire. They don't even know who it was. They just said some private helicopter came and dropped off a Starlink base and left the password, activated the account, but left the password open so anybody who's in the neighborhood who wants to contact their family can finally do so after a week of having no way to tell anybody what's happened to them. And they're just one small 30,000 or so greater person town in the general North Carolina mountainous area. Now, again, Tennessee's going through it, South Carolina, Georgia, parts of Southern Virginia and West Virginia, not to the necessarily same degree, but again, everybody's tragedy is relative to their circumstance and their expectations and their preparedness. So I'm not here to throw shade or talk politics or be in any way making the situation worse. What I'm trying to do is do the one thing that I cannot trust my media to do and give you an accurate, level-headed, adult conversation about what's going on. This is how it all started. I was just about to turn in for the night when I saw a call from my buddy who I hadn't heard from in a few days because I knew he lived in the area. And I knew I had been getting, a billion phone calls saying, are you okay? Are you good? Are you fine? Are you okay? Family members, people from other countries. I'm like, I'm fine. What's up? And then I go to look into why this hurricane that we all just saw as like leaves and wind in our backyard was like a cereal bowl of water and washing machines and church buildings and city buses and school buildings floating down the street just 2 hours away. The story hit a little bit home for me as that the day before I get this call, I had just visited a natural spring in Black Mountain, North Carolina. This is a spring that I've been going to since 2018, since my friend Josh told me about this. Josh is the guy who I knew the area, who I knew lived there, because he knows everything about holistic living, water. He's if anybody going through the apocalypse, he's the dude to be with, because he's not only does he know what he's doing, but he doesn't operate in fear. We'll put it like that. He operates in confidence, like I try to and like I encourage others to. I want to share with you how it begun, and then I'm going to share what we was talking about, because I think you'll probably find it a bit. Put it like this. I'm going to give it to you real, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and I'm not going to baby it like you're a 2-year-old, like you're watching the news. I'm not necessarily trying to be a journalist here, but I just feel something close to this because I was at the spring that he mentioned to me up in Black Mountain, North Carolina a week ago yesterday, last night, getting water, and a week ago tonight, the storm hit. So within a day of me and my daughter leaving with our 120 gallons of literally the purest water ever, the entire side of that mountain disappeared. Or at least got washed away. I can't say disappeared, but became unstable to the point of where hundreds of residents were trapped. A post went viral maybe a day or two later of an address in Black Mountain where 100 people and a pregnant lady were trapped. And it caught my attention because I looked at the address and I said, holy smokes, I was just there yesterday. I was literally there like 24 hours ago, 48 hours ago. Like, what's up? And it's caught my heart and my attention because this is my state. These are my friends. These are my people. These are good working Americans. These are, the area that it hit was largely an outdoorsy area. It was very beautiful. Some of where the worst of it was is a water table that sources and supplies fresh water to the entire southeast. Giant lakes will be affected. The effects of this will be systemic for freshwater bodies because of how much just mud and trash and natural gas and feces and decaying flesh and animal flesh and vulture poop, everything that's just washing through the fresh water as we speak. And it does seem that the federal response is woefully lacking. My buddy's sentiment, and I'll let you hear him tell it, but his sentiment is that the locals who've always lived there understand that this is not an act of God, this is an act of war in some sense. But they're not fighting each other, which is the encouraging. But it's all more crazy in a weirdly better and weirdly worse way than you would actually imagine that they're letting on. So I want to share with you guys that. So this is what started it all. I'm sitting at home and boom, I get this call.
Since Thursday night, really Friday early morning.
Whoa.
The grid went down. Yeah.
So wait. You say you're at the fire department with somebody in a private helicopter just dropped off a Starlink.
That happened a matter of a few hours ago.
Dang.
When it was still light, at the end of the day today. Yeah.
Got it. Wow.
So it's not mine, but no one has had. When I say no one in the valley has had communication, no one in the valley, and there's been no way out of the valley either. We've been completely. All the roads are gone,
bro.
Chris, it looks like I can't even put it. The scale of what has happened is terraformed the entire Earth to where it's unrecognizable to people who've been here their whole life, including people. I mean, I was evacuating people. Lots of people have died. So many houses are gone. Landslides, tornadoes happen. 30 inches of rain happened here in a matter of 10 hours. What they're saying is not even it's been the biggest weather.
And then, of course, my battery cut off. Essentially, what he's saying is they're not being accurate about the weather. It was way worse than they're letting on. They're talking about isolated hurricane-like situations in places that were nowhere near the worst of the epicenter. Now, again, ostensibly, it could be because the people who are affected worse by it they can't communicate at all. There's no communication methods. And it's taking now a week for people like me who are near and dear to the situation to even get enough info to be able to share it so that others can start to glean what's going on. I'm not going to put too much of my opinion in at this point. I'm just going to share with you what he is saying in hopes that maybe this can help prepare you and mentally give you a model to work from for what might be modern warfare. He certainly seems to think that it is. It certainly seems that way. It takes nothing to actually ask your fellow citizens and encourage and subsidize your fellow citizens, whether we're talking rich Republicans or in control of the national budget Democrats. It doesn't matter. Human decency is what matters. The human spirit, helping your fellow mankind or womankind go through what clearly is an unprecedented tragedy, is what matters. And so we gonna unpack it. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna stop talking. I'm gonna just show you what we was talking about during the live. I want y'all to congratulate him because he's about to be a father. Because his wife, in the midst of a crisis, is about to go give birth, and this dude ain't stressing not one bit because this will be free birth number what?
No, we've actually done. This is the number 5 unassisted home birth.
Okay, number 5, free birth number 5.
We've been doing this for a while.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when I tell you, when you speak about granola, ain't nothing more pure and earth, and we'll get into your backstory later. But the long and short of it was when I met you in 2007, you were cool, but you had a lot of health issues you were dealing with, and you hit a point where you essentially got the demons exorcised and your health went back to normal, and you turned into understanding the importance of raw living, raw water. You have a water company. You're the one who told me about the spring that I was just at the day before. It washed down the side of a mountain.
Yeah.
So, are you okay? Where are you? Are you freaking out? People, I'm sure.
Speaking of water, I just filled up 500 gallons of water that's behind my Land Rover right now. and this is an off-the-grid water supply that I had. We basically invested in this when we used to live in Charlotte, because back then we wanted to have living water in Charlotte until we were able to move to the mountains, which was always our intention. And we knew how bad the water quality was in every major city, including the fluoride issue, which is that I'm happy to know that there's a lot of people recognizing that fluoride is a neurotoxin, and that it's something that we should not be putting into our bodies. And that, of course, it calcifies the pineal gland. So all of my children have been raised on living water.
Right.
You know, I ferment foods. We create tonics from living water. We cook with it. We, in this case, now we shower with it.
Wait, you shower with tonics? You shower with fermented tonics? Fermentation fights fermentation. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Kapow!
Yeah. But no, I would recommend that everybody make strategic investments in being able to harvest wild water and do so in a way where it's in glass, and that it's really not that expensive. And I can tell you right now that nobody in our area, and there's a lot of very wealthy, prepped people, they lost everything, a lot of people, and but nobody was prepared in terms of just being able to maintain a standard of living after this, right? So it's like you're drinking fluorinated, chlorinated, microplastic water just to survive, because that's all that's being dropped off, where you actually could have been thriving in the midst of tragedy, which is what essentially my family's been doing. We've actually been doing better, and we've been preparing for the apocalypse, or the end of the world, if you will, for a long time. And no, we haven't. We're not supposed to be stored up for tomorrow. If you think about Scripture, right? And so you want to live on daily bread. So it's very important that we live on daily bread. But there is wisdom that we have, and there's also strategy that we have to be able to maintain. And so we've made strategic investments to be able to be ready. We just had no idea that the entire world was going to cave in around us, and specifically Western North Carolina.
Right.
And
so
that's what we're going to be talking about, I think, today.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I want to unpack it and then lead into you giving us your perspective from where you are, because I think a lot of people here are very interested in just being like, okay, what's true and what isn't. So Josh, we've been taught, like, the thing that has caught my eye in the last 2 nights that we've talked for 5 hours now at this point is just, we were prepared, but nobody was prepared for this. Like, this is unprecedented of scales. We have been talking about tornadoes in the mountains. You just were talking about what was the avalanche that you said was like 100-foot wall of water, literally.
They're calling these landslides avalanches. The people who witnessed them and saw. I mean, I evacuated a couple that the only reason we're even communicating right now, I should back up a second, because this event started on Thursday of last week.
All right,
we didn't get a start. Right, so you and I talked yesterday for the first time. That's because we've only had private aircraft coming in here, which, by the way, the FAA was not allowing them to come in for a while, apparently, because the first 2 days we saw 0 aircraft, and we should have seen aircraft. And I've got the only drone videos in this area, and of course, there's so much amazing footage now that I've got Starlink. Some rich person brought their helicopter in yesterday, dropped off a Starlink, and now the survivors in our area are flocking to the only place in this vast wilderness that we're in that has power, which is the fire department that has generators. This is kind of like central command for this area. But even still, the central command, we had no communication. And even still, they don't even have radios. The radios.
Right, that's another thing you said. This is, I'm going to, if it seems like I'm jumping around y'all, it's because I'm trying to completely saturate the conversation with as much detail so that whoever hears it can unpack it and run with it. So one of the things you mentioned that stuck out to me was people are coming, but the government's coming. They're just bringing nothing that's useful. We need communications. We got people trying to direct traffic on roads, and they have no way of talking to one another on the road. No walkie-talkies, no internal communications. You got the one and only external communication. For a population of how many people in the greater area would you estimate?
I don't know exactly how many people are in our town. I would say there's probably...
I'm saying within like a 10 or 15, 20 mile radius.
I would say just in our town, there's probably 20 to 30,000 people. And then we're like one of the fastest growing towns in Western North Carolina. Everybody's been leaving Asheville for a while since the COVID pandemic happened, right? And then, of course, people were leaving California looking for sustainability. And we have the greatest natural resources. So, we used to live on the West Coast too. My wife and I did. We lived in Northern California. We lived in Oregon. And then we did come back home, which was Charlotte for us. And we realized that we didn't want to get stuck in Charlotte when we came back in 2012. We ended up getting stuck in Charlotte, but we started to visit the mountains, and we realized we wanted to be somewhere near Mount Mitchell if we stayed on the East Coast. It was very strategic, our decisions on how we got here.
Now, why Mount Mitchell? In a nutshell, Mount Mitchell is the water table that's the purest water table that feeds lakes that are both north and south of it. Because of its elevation, the water flows down the mountains this way, every way, and north, south, and west, all the way down to hundreds of miles away. Freshwater lakes are fed. So the destruction of this, and the muddying, and the trashing, and the toxic, and the gas inclusion.
That's a toxic mess in terms of what's downstream, for sure. I mean, I'm now with the Starlink. I'm getting access, and I'm out late just to be able to get on. There's been hundreds, and if not thousands of people coming in on side-by-sides into our area. Imagine all of a sudden, it's not the Grand Canyon, but imagine a new Grand Canyon on the East Coast emerges. Mount Mitchell, for those of you who do not know, is the tallest mountain, and it's also the tallest range east of the Rockies. So as far as the eastern seaboard, Mount Mitchell is the highest headlands on the East Coast. And so when you think about an event happening at Mount Mitchell, you have to think about that because the Continental Divide, by the way, where you get your water, right, in Black Mountain, if you drive up a little bit further up the road, you'll see the sign that says Continental Divide. Right? So you have an incredible, basically the water supply for the South comes from here.
Got it.
And this event has taken place almost like a direct hit. From everything that we can see over our area. We're talking about Black Mountain. Montreat is gone. Swannanoa is gone. Marshall is gone. You've got like Burnsville. Burnsville, when you go to the town, by the way, the government resources have just started coming to Burnsville. I was there today. And the town of Burnsville, you wouldn't even know. It looks like it was, yet it's the home of Mount Mitchell. But it did not get affected. Yet they don't have running water for this. There's no water because why? The Canyon River provided the city water for Burnsville, and that huge at least 100-foot wall of water that came down and did this massive landslide, wiped out the pump station for the town and the entire sewage system for the town. So there's no water, sewer. That you can't. No one can throw trash. They're telling people to burn the trash right now, right? This is what's going on, and this goes out to Spruce Pine. This goes out to Weaverville, north of Asheville, and Asheville is what I'm really concerned about because the dependency of everyone. I can go out and start hunting season. Not to say I'm doing this. I'm just saying around here we can start hunting season early if we needed to survive. And I'm not saying I'm doing that. I'm just saying that's what the locals are looking at, saying, hey, if we don't get aid, we're going to have to care for ourselves. But what hunting season looks a lot different when you're
Asheville, in a city. Yeah. Okay. Right. So the one thing that I want to do is a brief little insertion just for people to understand. North Carolina is a wide and long. It's like a wide and not that tall state, right? It's kind of shaped like a key almost. So everything that's happening is happening in the Blue Ridge Mountains, which are on the western edge of North Carolina, where the peak of the mountain range kind of branches over into Tennessee. So Tennessee is dealing with a lot of the same thing that North Carolina is dealing with. The issue that we're all coming to understand is that communication for the most affected areas is what's not being allowed to let everybody know that the most affected areas. So what's happening is our federal responses, from what we're allowed to see visibly, are woefully slow. And they're focusing on, like Biden's talking, oh yeah, Florida. I'm sorry about what happened in Florida. Like, and again, not that Florida didn't deal with stuff, but in terms of like scale and scope, there's no 100-foot wall of water tsunamis in the mountains
in
Florida right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
we'll get into the why in a bit, Kelly, because that can tangent. But I didn't want to derail Joshua's story because what I want people to understand is someone's true perspective from someone who's there. If you have a second phone, if you have a laptop, look up these places on the map. Just type in Asheville, North Carolina.
And so look up YouTube as well.
Look up
You're
YouTube.
seeing a lot.
Look up Mars Hill, North Carolina.
They're starting to get communication as of today.
Mm-hmm.
So the thousands and thousands of stories that have been not heard. I mean, I've got drone videos. I've got videos on my phone that no one's seen. Now, I'm sure it's the case for everyone. So,
I'm sure.
Whatever they did to try to the political cycle, the media cycle, whatever, it just made it seem like it wasn't even a thing.
Right.
It's such a big deal, and the fact that nobody has responded, and the fact that it was covered up, is going to be to the detriment of the government, I would say, because we've already banded together because it was a life and death scenario. I mean, every piece of equipment. I mean, I literally reappropriated or hijacked equipment that didn't belong to me, worth millions of dollars across the street because I know how to run these machines. I just so happened to be across the street, and the keys were in the ignition
of a bulldozer, basically.
Excavators, huge excavators for mining. These excavators saved many lives, and yet all the work that's been done over the last week has been done by men and women in our valley, and us coming together and utilizing every resource available to us with no outside help, because there was no outside help. We weren't even able to get to town until yesterday.
So I'm very glad you said that. For everybody listening, please understand that when everybody talks about Biden's disaster relief plan, Trump's disaster relief plan, that is all, I'm just going to say it, bullshit. It's a whole heap of horse manure of the of the highest order, because it doesn't actually matter in practice. What matters in practice is how prepared you are. And how prepared / how in the same frequency, we'll just say, is your community. Are y'all dissonant with one another? I don't mean it in a woo-woo sense. I just mean it in a very simplistic sense. Are y'all like this with one another? Or are y'all like this with one another? That's the difference. Because the difference in where you are and Asheville, which is how many miles away? How many miles?
Well, the way the bird flies, and these mountains are
well, the way the bird flies, because again, keep in mind, in the mountains, y'all, the roads are windy. So you could be over here, and then there's a mountain, and then there's a city here, and y'all are like a mile apart, but it takes you 30 minutes to just drive around.
Right. I mean, it just to get 3 miles this way, it takes 40 minutes that way to get there.
Right.
Right. So we're maybe 15 miles from city center Asheville, yet we're in the wilderness.
Right.
And Mount Mitchell State Park. Right.
Exactly.
And so it's a remote place, but you would not know it right now because the side-by-sides, the four-wheelers have been coming in because people have been sharing the footage of what's going on. Mm-hmm. And honestly, if I owned a side-by-side and a four-wheeler and I was anywhere near, I probably would come look too, just because you hear the word.
But repeat why. Tell us why, like as if you're just me and you were just riffing. Well, you said earlier, you said everybody's coming because it's like they're just kind of curious about this new terraform. Like, wait, what? It's a little bit of wanting to help, a little bit of curious. Like, what are we dealing with?
Yeah, they've heard the news, and so like imagine you invest $10,000 into a four-wheeler, right? Or you got, I mean, I'm seeing $100,000 side by sides, ridiculous stuff, like buggies coming in. And they're all strapping, a couple boxes of water or whatever, or, bags of water, and coming in.
Not $100,000 worth of water, but just.
No, but that's their excuse to get in. They're like, oh, we're going out to help out. Everybody wants to help out. But really what they really want to do is their minds being blown because no one has seen this level of natural force and destruction and terraforming ever in their life. It happened overnight. We're talking about what might look like, carving over thousands of years or hundreds of years, let's say.
Or a mud flood. I mean, oops.
Right. There you go. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So this goes deep, as everybody that's on this channel knows.
There you go. Yeah.
I want to stay on track here.
Of course,
basically, people are coming in because the road system, which was, I won't say which road I live off of, but already the people who knew this road, they brought their exotic cars up here. They had their motorcycle clubs. People came up these roads because of the epic wonder and the beauty around it as you're just driving. But when those roads got washed, and when I say washed away, it looks like an earthquake. The way that the asphalt was crumpled up and weighed, right, shifted, moved out of place.
Like going like this.
Everybody's starting to see the destruction. I'm not saying that any of the videos that I'm going to provide any level of the grandeur of the urban destruction,
right.
because I'm in the natural side of things.
Right.
People lost their homes and their livelihoods and their lives over here, but I'm at the beginning of the headwaters of a major river, right? Mm-hmm. There's another one on the other side of Mount Mitchell that has the same thing going on. It's the same story. What I can tell you is that the people in those valleys, tens of thousands of people that are in those valleys, many of them were stuck until just recently. They have been. There's, probably 20 to 30 helicopters coming into our valley a day right now. They're all bringing water. I could show you right now in the fire department if it was open. It's all stacked up. We don't need any more water. How much more water do you need to send? How much is a flight to send up here?
Right.
To send us something we don't need more of, right?
The fuel alone of the flight, right?
Exactly. So with that said,
keeping in mind, and the reason they don't need this is because they're not in Arizona or Texas or Nebraska. They're in the wateriest place on earth with the most pristine spring water that waters the whole southeast.
I can walk up to a spring and literally put my ball underneath it without any sanitation at all, without any filtration.
Yes. So Kelly wants to know if we can help. People can help, and what Josh and I have been talking about is consolidating a way for what seems to be the one hiccup and the kink in the chain is communication. Nobody is able to communicate what they need for help. So people are saying, hey, we want to help, and everybody's assuming the worst. Why? Because the media is showing them a narrow focus of and I don't want to say a sensational thing, because clearly 100-foot wall of water and a tornado in a mountain is a sensational thing. So of course it's a sensation, and of course it's a spectacle. And it's not even necessarily clickbait, although sometimes it is. It's simply a narrow window of the scope. And I was telling someone this earlier. It seems that people go from being the extreme is split between we're not okay and it's literal catastrophe and there's bodies floating, or there's looting, like in the case of certain parts of Asheville, or we're good, we're fine, thank God our family escaped, a little flooding, a tree or two down, but otherwise. It's those two extremes.
It's extreme. It literally is life and death, and just kind of getting back to life because your power went off, and it's going to be restored in a little bit.
Now, if I had to ask you, just because I never asked you this, life and death, if you had to just guesstimate your hunch, I know you can't predict no numbers, this is a clear guesstimation, but are you good? Is it a 50-50, a 70-30? What when you say death percentage versus life percentage based on just what you know?
Well, I know that there's been more deaths than what the media is reporting. They're talking about the entire storm only killing less than 200 people.
Yeah,
that's happened in our county alone.
Right.
Let's just leave it at that, right? And that's not even Asheville. People were dying in Asheville.
Right. He said 30,000 in your general area. Asheville is 100,000, y'all. Just so y'all know.
Is that what Asheville's?
I just looked it up. Yeah, it's 109 or 103 or something like that.
Right, and then all the surrounding areas. That's what people don't realize, and I think that's getting out, is that Asheville's a hub, right? But the destinations and the places that people have been flocking to for outdoor recreation are all just outside of Asheville, right? In every one of these areas, not maybe everyone, there are pockets that did not get affected, but those that are closest to Asheville did get affected. And,
right.
and you guys are seeing the footage as you see. So, looking at people are asking for body bags, it says at a meeting in town hall. There's definitely bodies that have floated down the river. There's been recovery of dead bodies that have been happening in this area. A lot of this has taken place in subsequent days, or in days past, I should say, where, the first rescuers were getting in, right? And so the biggest thing we've had is an outpouring of people looking to help. People coming in from Avery County, people coming in from different counties. But the reality is there's been no communication, no ability to communicate, no central command. So everybody's just been doing what they can, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you didn't have a side by side, right? So the first thing that happened was once we turned back the river and we were able to divert this creek that flooded the entire town into where it was supposed to go, we then were able to take this heavy equipment and start using resources in our valley to fill in these massive gaping holes that we could drive. Well, that's when we started, and I put my drone up and I could see massive bridges that connected lots of people to their areas of the mountains, gone, just completely gone. Like, how did these things go? That's how powerful the wall of water was. And it was not just a wall that was like a tidal wave, it was a continuous wall for a day.
So in that clip, I'm glad you said that. You said they're saying, you know, he was like, Chris, you don't understand. It was like 30 inches of rain in 10 hours. And I'm like, 3 inches of rain per hour? He was like, yeah, I walked outside and I was walking in constant rain that was 3 inches thick that didn't stop for hours and hours.
Yeah, it didn't stop. It was literally, I've never seen anything like it. It was, I had this headlamp on right here. And, you know, I've been, you know, like you mentioned, I'm an outdoors guy. I've been in plenty of rain events.
Tilt the phone down so we can see you a bit better, because there we go. Yeah, the comments will block your face otherwise.
So I will say this: the people that are in this area that I'm in, a lot of them, there's a lot of Floridians that have established residencies up here in the 1950s and 60s. There was a resort up here. The highest airport, or I should say private airstrip, east of the Rockies is our neighbor, right? That got evacuated right before the storm, and then apparently the runway has been damaged, and they won't let anybody fly in to bring supplies in,
right,
which is just right there.
Right.
But what was the question again? I'm sorry.
The question is, like, how, like, I want you to unpack just how people have been the help that we have. I'm trying to word it.
Let me add this real quick.
Okay.
In conjunction with that. So the people here, I didn't know many of them before, right? Actually, they didn't know me. They've come up to me having overheard me speak maybe at a table with an individual. I didn't even know I was being listened to. And even the next day, hey, I heard you yesterday speaking. I want to tell you that encouraged me or whatever. But what I've been bringing to the table is that this is not natural. And what's interesting is that these are not conspiracy theories that we've been living around, right?
Right.
These are people that settled this area maybe a couple hundred years ago. Their families and their names tell you the story, because the store that washed away, it had their last name on it, right?
Right.
And it was there from the turn of the century, 1900.
Right.
And then before that, they were there. These people know the old way, but yet they're so dependent, just like everybody in the cities. They're so dependent on the system to feed them, to care for them, right?
Mm-hmm. Pharmaceutically, the normal things, you know.
Right. So when that got cut off, it literally was survival. I mean, in the truest sense. Mm-hmm. And so what we've seen is that everybody has come together, and there has been. I can't tell you you're going to go out and meet everybody in your area right now. You're going to have devastation probably come to your area before you're going to be able to see the best of humanity come out, right? But what I will say is you need to be prepared. You need to be getting prepared right now. I know a lot of channels are all about prep, right? And people have been saying this is kind of like your last chance, and it's been a lot of clickbait and, you know, really a lot of fear to motivate people to try to, you know, buy things that you need to get. But the reality is that you do need to get prepared, because what we are seeing right now is a planned event. And that's what I was getting at, is that these older folks, when I've mentioned weather warfare, modification, direct energy weapons, things like this, they actually have been saying this doesn't feel like an act of God. This feels like war.
Wow. You mentioned that's huge.
My mind, because I'm not trying to convince them of that. I know that's what it is. Wow. Guys, I mean, and girls, this is war. This is what war looks like. We know, I'm not saying that this is Russia, but we know Russia was involved with the U.S. in creating HARP. Right? And so,
I've seen channels that are breaking down the storm systems that became Helene and the ones that are coming, and they're showing where the beams and, like, okay, there's one here, there's a they basically said there is two research projects in the Gulf. One's a German one, or Russian or German one, and one's a French one. And it's like, my, how convenient that these, atmospheric research projects are going right in the path of these crazy hurricanes that create 100-foot walls in the mountains.
And I'll add this too, just as a side note. We have not had any mosquitoes up here this year. There's mosquitoes now.
Oh, wow. Oh, because of the water, or just because of...
Yeah, well...
They hit the mosquito button.
Me.
Yeah, right.
Did Bill Gates release them after the storm? I mean,
it was mosquito pee. That's what it was. It wasn't water. I don't mean to be insensitive. I'm just saying... It's kind of, you're underscoring what I think a lot of questions have asked in the comments. Do you feel that it's man-made, geoengineering? The answer is a resounding yes. But I want, and we can definitely go down that tangent in this conversation, but we all agree on it. So there's no we can all pontificate and circle jerk about how we know it was geoengineered. The thing that gripped me about your story was when you called me and you were like, bro, this is worse than people are saying. There's whole towns washed away. So and so's underwater. And then you say, but the craziest thing is like I was going out on the 4-wheeler and it was like I was so euphoric because of the raw earth and land and beauty that it was offsetting the tragedy since the community came together. You're like, I've never even met these people, and everybody's just together, and then a week later the government shows up with stuff y'all already have.
Right. So the government's going to they cannot take, for this area, they cannot take credit at all for anything, and everybody down here knows that. That's the thing that's been revealed, is that no matter which way the media spins this, and by the way, this is the case for Asheville, we're talking about probably 250,000, probably more. I mean,
probably close to 350 to 400,000 people affected.
That's how many people are being really affected. So when you lie to that many people,
right? Where their whole house washed, or at least some of them's house washed away.
Exactly.
Yeah. It doesn't work.
This event's going to be huge because this event is going to be the event that wakes people up, because we were coming right before the election, of course. And this is, if you will, kind of, from a political point of view, not to say that Asheville's this way, but the surrounding area is Trump country. Correct.
So just for context, this is North Carolina. The greater extent of eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina is for sure Trump country, with notable exceptions being Asheville, North Carolina. It is literally the bluest place on earth. It's very Wiccan, very witchy.
Very, very transgender, very anything goes.
It's like if you lived in LA, it's the Silver Lake, Echo Park, West Hollywood of Los Angeles. That's Asheville, North Carolina. And it's like, I enjoy going to Asheville. One of the first times we reconnected was in Asheville with your whole family at the time. And I just remember thinking, between the stories I'd heard about what happens over the mountain. What's your homie who we met with he makes the tonic?
Matthew? Makes the tonic? Julio?
Yes. I saw him at the spring one day. Randomly, we just bumped into each other. I was like, word. Josh told you about the same spring. Yeah, we go to the same spring.
That's cool, yeah.
And we got to talking about ghost stories, about what happens on the other side of the mountain. And he told me a lot of the stuff he had heard. And so I've always had these stories about, these mountains got some, it's some gold, and it's some great.
Deep underground military bases has been one of the conspiracies as well in these areas.
You have to keep in mind, so
underneath the watershed, there's a lake that services the water for Asheville.
There's
and
that.
For many, many years, if we've been investigating things that have been going on, phenomenons over there. Go ahead.
For that, there's the whole Apple iCloud data center. That's probably 40, 50 miles just east in Marion. Marion's not that far. How far is Marion?
Marion's down the mountain from us. So,
right.
I mean, I could be in Marion in probably 45 minutes.
Right, so that's where a giant data center is for everybody's iPhones and Apple, everything. For the whole East Coast. It's their second biggest one. I've been told, who knows. They change this stuff all the time. Anyway, there's the Quartz Mine in Spruce Pine. People. Okay. Now I want to address what I've gotten a lot of messages about today. Multiple people, close to 10 or so people have messaged me like, hey, what are your thoughts on this whole quartz mine and this lithium mine that are being discussed? And I was telling Joshua this before we hopped on live, because we were talking like an hour, and I was like, we got to go live. People need to hear this. So what I've noticed just since I heard about this last Friday or Saturday, within a day or two of it happening, just because of all the people asking if I was okay, is that the conversation is spreading, but it's the things that are bubbling to the top are FEMA or the authorities are not letting people in. The entire western part of the state's underwater. And there's a lithium mine that's nearby that's like, if this floods, this is hella toxic, which is true, but it's kind of like, all right, y'all, Bessemer City is a bit far. But
it's actually not even that far. It's not even close to us.
Right, I know, but that's what I'm saying. So that's why I'm bringing the quartz mine.
The next town to us is our next door neighbor, and that's where the most valuable quartz deposit in the world, the purest quartz in the world, is at.
Right.
So our iPhones right now, everybody's computers have a piece of spruce pine in them. They just don't know that.
Pause that. Recycle that. I'm going to unpack it for the back person with the silver leather jacket. He just said everybody's iPhone, everybody's Android phone, everybody's MacBook Pro, Dell, Chromebook, everybody's Apple Watch, all the high-end audio equipment that all your music in the big studios that you hear on the radio is all made on, is using a piece of glass that jitters and oscillates on a consistent frequency due to its intrinsic properties that make audio signals and time clocking. It's really what's used for time clocking. Very pure. It's a literal rock inside your phone in a very small way on a semiconductor that keeps time. And that rock is mined exclusively or primarily from a city just down the road from where you are. They synthesize quartz as well, but for certain applications, and I see people talking about AI, right? Specifically for AI, right, and semiconductors, all this, they have to use the purest quartz, and that's coming from spruce pine. So we have talked before this happened. We started thinking from a warfare standpoint. We know that if, let's say, China calls it a debt, or whoever calls debt, how will this country repay? Well, future labor interest deposit, but go ahead.
Maybe a quartz deposit here, maybe this, there, that, and so that's kind of what I'm seeing, right?
You know what, I like, Pontiff, keeping in mind, y'all, we're going to put brackets around this and saying nobody knows, we're just speculating and using our inferences and our judgment and our spidey senses and the Holy Spirit and everything mixed between, and saying there's a lot of incentive to create an anomaly. People need to understand. I can't say people need to understand. The reason I'm coming on live with this gentleman, for anybody who's just joining us, this is somebody I'm in North Carolina, he's in North Carolina. But he's in a place where you got to use an ATV to get around because his entire street was washed down the mountain. And I'm somewhere where a tree blew over and that was it. So I hadn't heard from him in a while, and I'm like, Josh live over there. Let me make sure his family's okay. And like a few days later, he was like, bro, it's the craziest thing. And we've been talking. Why? Because he didn't have a way to even tell anybody until yesterday. When some random millionaire or rich person with a helicopter said, here's some internet. Was it the government? Was it Kamala? Was it Joe? Was it Donald Trump?
Because I have Starlink now for 2 nights in a row, and I just got on to talk to you, I saw that Biden had a press conference with Cooper today, and he took
Cooper is the mayor of North Carolina. Continue.
No, he's the governor of North Carolina.
The governor, sorry, that's what I meant. Governor of North Carolina.
So he's saying he's taking credit for sending Starlinks out. Biden is.
First of all, I'm telling you, this is a small institution that's hijacking everything, knowing that ain't none of y'all gonna get to talk to nobody that's really there. And I'm telling you, that's why I'm doing this. I'm not a journalist by trade.
And this is just the beginning. We're gonna get more. We're gonna get more context to this whole thing. But I want to jump to this real quick. And I started thinking about it when you were speaking about why Asheville. Okay, so Asheville is because of its far left, right? The polarization on the outskirts of Asheville is extreme, right? the propaganda and basically the
That's
campaign.
a great point. I didn't think about that.
So we have
Wow.
Civil War, right? We are in the South.
Yeah, it might as well be the War of Independence reenacted for the cameras.
That's what I'm getting at. Like it started dawning on me.
Yeah,
I was like, hang on a second. If they
wow.
were going to create civil unrest and this was going to start to a civil war type of experience. Now, I'm not saying it will. We're seeing beauty right now from this event. People are coming together. They know one another. There's love that's being shared. There's resources being shared. Lives are being touched. Perspectives being given. They're realizing what matters most, right? I mean, I've been seeing that. But when people cannot have proper sanitation in Asheville, they don't have water, they don't have cash, and already there's a homeless epidemic in Asheville. There's a not just a drug epidemic everywhere, but on the outskirts of the small towns, there's fentanyl crisis and all this kind of stuff. Yet there's also cultural differences, and so if you get those to clash based on a lack of resources,
water, that's your powder keg. That's your powder keg. That's your gunpowder. So just to restate,
sheriffs are escorting today. I heard from Asheville, the sheriffs are escorting water trucks. That's how precious the water and valuable the water is. Like it's a literally bank vault rolling through town, right? That's what's going on because people don't have water in a major city for 7 days.
So, okay, just so everybody's aware who might just be like, okay, why is it really that significant? 60 seconds or less. A week ago, today, basically, a hurricane swept all the way from the Gulf through the bottom middle of the southeast of our country and up into the mountains and kind of fizzled out as soon as it got a little north of that into a city that wreaked a lot of devastation called Asheville, North Carolina, and the surrounding areas. We're focusing on Asheville, but yes, Tennessee was heavily affected. Yes, Florida was heavily affected. Yes, Georgia was heavily affected. Probably aspects of West Virginia, I even heard, got a little bit of it. That being said, focusing on what seems to be like the worst of the worst in the middle, the epicenter of it, is this mountain town in western North Carolina called Asheville, North Carolina. It's right where the Biltmore State is. If you want to know where your boy Anderson Cooper grew up, it was right there. Yeah, there's long been rumors that there's military bases and just government activity under the ground. Who can prove it? Nobody. So whatever. The point that Josh is trying to make is that in a political microcosm condensed into a 50 square mile radius, Asheville is unique in several ways. Not only does it supply the water and the fresh water to the southeast, basically, it has a political climate that's very blue in the middle and extremely red all around it. Very, very blue in the middle to the like when I say very witchy, very Wiccan, very like
Portland,
it's
Oregon.
Super Portland. It's literally Portland. Or Portlandia in North Carolina. It's Portlandia in North Carolina. No joke. So
and idiocracy as well.
Right. Asheville already was like Portland, like San Francisco, like Venice Beach, where when you go there, it's seedy. Asheville was beautiful, but it's seedy. Venice Beach is beautiful, but it's seedy. We want to live on Huntington or Hermosa, Marina. We don't want to live up on Venice. We'll do Santa Monica. We'll do Pacific Palisades or Malibu. But we don't want that little Venice little area is seedy. So Asheville is seedy. The surrounding areas are not seedy. So we're talking a seedy liberal middle surrounded by a relatively rich suburb, all of whom are whoosh, just throwing a tsunami in the mountains, never mind how that even exists. And then a week later, the surrounding towns that are more likely faring better than the middle of town are finally able to talk about it. Now, I do have my neighbors, sisters in Asheville, my sister's good friend. She was just in Asheville last week, like a week or two ago. They both evacuated, so they're out. And I'm sure plenty of people evacuated. So I know that the story is not tragic for everyone. But in certain parts and pockets, keeping in mind a bit, New York, right? But if the Bronx was on fire and Manhattan wasn't, it's still New York, right? Yeah. So this pocket of this country not only has courts that's quite important for many uses and water that's quite important for many uses, but people and timber.
Yeah.
Right, and the sixth wonder of the world, the Appalachian, the Blue Ridge Mountains, it's smack dab in the middle. You have a political polarization that's essentially perfect in a very, very small area. Because Asheville's like, it's 100,000 people, but it's not huge. You can drive from one side to the next if it was like flat and straight with no like stoplights in like 10 minutes, right? It's like, it's not that physically big. It's just dense and it's mountainous. So it's like people up the mountain. It's very beautiful. It's just, it's prickly because I've been told like the real estate was hella overpriced and people are like, don't even bother looking in Asheville, go somewhere north or south. It's just way too not worth it in Asheville. So can take all of these things and then, however it happens, a giant hurricane that everybody was anticipating, just nowhere near the scope of what it ended up being, has now created conditions where there's like bodies washing up here and there's shutdowns there in a city where, what were you told earlier today?
What's that? Oh yeah, well, the only news I got from the person I would trust the most right now said that they were looking to implement martial law in Asheville because the looting was getting out of control.
Right. So now I want people to understand that a person there delivering the news to another person there who happens to have a Starlink connection to be able to talk with me so we can relay it to y'all. That does not mean it is ubiquitously as dire, but it also doesn't mean that there isn't tragedies up the mountain that y'all even aren't aware of, or that this next storm isn't going to be what.
That's the other thing. That people are concerned about the next storm now, and that's why when you start to recognize this may be weaponized, they could send another one up here as a 1-2 punch. Because if this didn't get, and by the way, I think we're going to see that their plans are going to backfire. Chris, I mean, we're optimistic here, right?
We are.
We recognize that our battle's not against flesh and blood. It's an adversarial force. It's a spiritual dimension that we're dealing with. And so this powers that be, they are trying to bring out the worst of humanity. That's what this whole event is about.
Right.
But
and they're
right
using
now,
the media and the maneuvering of information to do that. Somebody just asked, said they should call in the National Guard. It's already been called in.
It's already here.
Yeah, I know people who are
coming in today.
Well, I know people. I was going to go to our property, which is several hours north of where you are, which we haven't even heard how bad or not that is. But I was planning on going there with my family last weekend. We were going to meet some friends in Knoxville just for dinner. And, the person said that between Nashville and Knoxville, now we're talking several miles west of where you are, but between Nashville and Knoxville, there were close to 100 National Guard. And this was not this past Saturday, this past weekend, so almost like 4 or 5 days ago, meaning the National Guard's been there. The TV's just not saying it. The information's just not being conveyed. And at the same time, the National Guard's not actually helping necessarily. Now, I don't want to say that as a blanket, they haven't helped anyone.
They haven't helped down here, and I can tell you I've been down here the whole time. And what I will say is that the only help that could help anybody right now is heavy equipment and diesel fuel. I mean,
and communications, you said.
And obviously communications for sure.
But if you had to list your top three: communications, diesel, and heavy equipment.
Well, I mean, obviously there's things like, I come in live from Collabradoodles, and we have a dog pack. We have an unusual situation because we're not dog breeders. We actually are dog lovers, and we have more dogs than most people would ever consider having. But we have a program that's been developed over a decade with 4 different generations of what we call Collabradoodles. You guys can look at our page. And I have to keep these dogs alive. Mm-hmm. And I spend a lot of money every day keeping these dogs alive until we find the right homes, because we primarily work with people for service dogs. And that doesn't mean you have to have a specific disability. That just means you want an amazing dog that's been bred specifically to be your best friend and go everywhere with you.
Right.
And so that's what we do. So to look at, I don't want to downplay the need for food, but what good is food when they're telling you that it's going to be a year before your power's back on? Asheville may get their power back, but they're saying a year before we get power back, right? Will it be that? When you start looking at the devastation, it's easy to see that it very well could be. And so looking at what's actually needed is if the government's response is they need the Army Corps of Engineers, they need to be in, and we need because the cleanup effort is not just like cleaning up trash. We're talking about the entire infrastructure,
It's
city
terraformed.
water. It's gone.
So just so people are really grasping, it's a scale, right? You know, some areas of the city look like they did with a few trees and leaves blown. Other areas of the city look like a different country all of a sudden, because in the mountains you have these valley cities, right? The big mountains, and in these valleys are these cities along the valley, and then the rich folk live up in the hills where you can afford to build up there, and they all drive down to the city for the groceries and the stuff and the toiletries and all
that's
this
the people that got stranded and killed. I'm just telling you, that's
all the rich folks in the mountains essentially are. I can't say all the rich. I don't want to belittle it, and I don't want people to develop emotional triggers for any sort of like judgment or anything. People are people. They've been fortunate enough to afford homes in a very pretty and sought after location up in the hills, which is like you're winning in life. So congratulations for that. But many of them are suffering the hardest because it's just no way to get where roads aren't anymore. If you can imagine like an ice cream sundae, or like a volcano that has a whole city built on it, and then lava comes off the volcano and just reshapes what it all looks like, and there's no recognizable city. That's what it looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. And people, I'm looking at some of the comments here too. I mean, we can talk about how to help in terms of us. I mean, I will say we had 6 bags of dog food dropped off by a helicopter yesterday. World Central Kitchen, I think is what it's called. Apparently, they're running flights all over the world. I don't know who they are. They're one of the private organizations bringing aid in. But there's a lot of animals that are in need. And we have some of those animals. I mean, we have livestock. We have chickens and rabbits and ducks and of course, the dogs. And so no one's really been thinking about them. You know, and that's the case for us. It's the case for others, too. There's plenty of meals that are being made. Tons of food has been coming into the valley. You don't even have to prepare food anywhere around us. You could just come here and eat. That's how much food's coming in here.
Like them four-wheelers, like them overlanders.
Oh, well, that's the thing. Is that
you mentioned that earlier, bro. This dude said so many tourists have been coming that it's like they've been eating the food that the other tourists bring.
Right. So that's the problem is that everybody's coming in and they want to help. But yet there's families down here that actually need real help. But I'm using my own fuel to be able to evacuate people who've lost everything out of treacherous road that you can only get through with a very capable overlanding vehicle.
Right.
And then I'm gonna have to wait for 2 hours to get fuel in town to be able to go back to my family. My wife's about to give birth, and then I'm responsible for So it doesn't make any sense, but. That said, the fire department they said if you're going to run out of fuel, we don't want you to run out of fuel, come by here, we've got some fuel over here. But they haven't just given fuel out. Mm-hmm. So that said, I'm looking at this and saying, people were talking about orgonite and things like that. I mean, these mountains are made of rare earth minerals.
Yeah, they are orgonite.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, you've been to Sedona before, right?
I've been to Sedona, yeah.
Sedona is known for the energy vortexes.
Yeah.
Well,
you can feel it.
There's 24 vortexes in the Asheville area.
Oh.
Including one where
So, okay, well, there go your military base and your witchcraft, like, right there. Like, it's kind of
right,
like...
so you're talking about, like, Shasta type stuff, right?
Yeah, Mount Shasta type stuff, yeah.
Right, so this area, it has long been highly valued. This is not new. But... what I'm seeing right now is they're trying to spark, if you looked at predictive programming, right, and leave the world behind, all that stuff. Like, this is the beginning of something of a chain reaction between now and, let's call it, election. And now we got the port thing that we found out about. None of us knew what was going on. Now we're figuring it all out. I think somebody said, what is a vortex? Basically, what we're dealing with is the Earth has certain energy fields, right?
They call them ley lines. They call them portals. It's not like portals of travel. It's just areas where people who are very sensitive to spiritual matters in the veil can tell. Oh, right here. I don't know what it is, but here it is, y'all. This is the doorway. They can just.
And by the way, I mean, I'm in a dark sky area. I can see the Milky Way at night. So that's another thing too. This is a very, you can't see it in Nashville, but in certain areas on the outskirts, this area is known. For example, the Appalachian Mountains are the most biodiverse forest in the world. You know, we have the ability, you can hunt, you can forage, you can eat mushrooms if you don't eat animals.
You can eat rice. I met a dude at the spring. He was like, oh, I'm a wild rice foraging instructor. I said, wild rice foraging? Where do you find that? He said, the mountains of North Carolina are the most prolific place for wild rice. I said, what? I've been in North Carolina my whole life. I've never heard that. He's like, yeah, that's what I do. That's my job. I'm like, I need to come talk to you. I need to get some wild rice. But to your point, who knew? Who knew?
Right. So like the reishi mushroom is the number one herb in Chinese medicine, has been for thousands of years, and it grows in these mountains in abundance. The shaga mushroom is another one, right? These are cancer killers. By the way, the lion's mane, which a lot of people can get those, but lion's mane is one that in my family, we eat pretty much every day.
You ferment them. I had Joe like, what was that? Some like rice. We had some like curry. What was that stuff? You fermented hot sauce that time when we had that.
Oh yeah, I do fermented hot sauce. I mean,
I ain't never got drunk off some hot sauce. I was like, oh snap, oh snap, oh bruh, like what are you talking about? Like, oh snap.
So all of these mushrooms, they grow in abundance as well. With what just happened, the landslides, the ginseng,
the ginseng, that's huge, yeah.
Right? So the list goes on, and people who know these mountains know this. I think everything's going to be okay. I think nature will bounce back here.
Well, I think enough of nature didn't get destroyed for nature to kind of just like have pruned itself almost in a way.
If anything, what happened from my perspective is, and I'm not speaking about anybody that specifically, I'm just saying that there's a lot of things that were built near the water that in an event like this that no one's ever seen before did get wiped out. And we're going to have more respect, honestly, for what's possible in these days, in these last days, right? Because the cataclysmic events, we've been watching them unfold for a while where, 20,000 homes are burned in a night. People call it they call it wildfire.
Where the inside of a tree is burning, but the outside ain't.
The great example, and of course they talk about a hurricane of fire too coming through. That's what it's like when you're there. So we know that this is an engineered attack. We don't know all the reasonings for it, but I think what we're going to do as we stay in tune with one another in the days ahead, and we get some first-person accounts of more stuff going on. I think this is just going to be the tipping point into something bigger that's going to start to affect all of us. And I think it already is, because you said, hey, well, if I'm on this other town, like, for example, Mars Hill. I heard Mars Hill, north of Asheville, it was totally fine, right? But Marshall, south of that, got washed out completely. Interesting. And so, but here's the thing. Mars Hill still had to go to Marshall to get stuff.
Right.
And then everybody's being affected, and it's not a little bit of affected. I can't go to Johnson City anymore for the next year, they're saying, because 26 is so damaged, it's going to take till September of 2025 to fix from one night of rain.
Yeah, one night of rain.
This was not a wind event. We had 106-mile-an-hour winds at the top of Mount Mitchell is what they're saying. That's what the press conference today with Biden said. They clocked 106-mile-an-hour winds. We probably had, down where we're at, we probably maybe had 50, 60 mile an hour, something like that. This was a rain event. I don't know how they accomplished dropping as much rain as they did, but it's ungodly the amount of rain, to the point where these old folks who have been around are looking at this and saying, this doesn't seem right. This seems unnatural. This seems like, right? So we look at this and say, this is just the beginning.
For sure. There was something you just mentioned that reminded me of like, oh yeah, you gotta tell them. Okay. You were saying how it was the amount of water, like it wasn't so much a wind event, but like a rain event. And
people are calling it biblical flooding, biblical in proportion.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's saying, you know, Noah, remember how the promise was given that you wouldn't flood. That's what I'm getting at. There's these unnatural things, and even things that God promised He would not do. Of course, you know, it wasn't 40 days and 40 nights,
right.
but you can imagine. You can imagine. Okay, this is what it was like. Okay,
it was a Universal Studios. Listen. That's kind of funny, but like in like
yeah.
to the degree that we're in meta world where Universal Studios is like taking over the whole East Coast and built a portion of the mountain range as their Sea World, because that's essentially what it was like. So I remember what I was gonna say. You said in a night of rain this happened. I want people to unpack how we have Starlink satellite communications bringing us the news a week after it happened, so that a good amount of people can see it, share it, and maybe trickle it out from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 10 with the internet, 4G, 5G, and Starlink, 18 gigahertz or whatever.
Yep.
How easy is it with technology that may or may not be based on simple like electromagnetic manipulation at the end of the day, to wipe out whole towns before the internet and have one generation of people forget their existence? You see what I'm saying? It's like, it's unpacking the implications of what it means to conduct warfare in a way that seems like attrition might have been a red herring the whole time. Because they've been doing cellular warfare the whole time. They've been doing food warfare the whole time. They've been doing household spiritual warfare the whole time. They've been doing your educational warfare the whole time. They've been doing financial warfare the whole time. They've been talking about the whole private-public thing. And it's almost like the Army thing was really just a brute way to kind of like, you know, MMA it all for a season and trump up the luge, at least within the West. I shouldn't underplay this, because in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, it ain't been no joke. It's been real, you know, real to the wall to them. But soldiers now are realizing, I entered this whole conversation under false pretense. Like, I entered it altruistically, but I was presented it with false pretenses. And now I'm grappling with the moral disease that y'all label PTSD. And this pill isn't helping, and like my family is breaking apart, and it's because you were made into a form of a human weapon, and you haven't come to grips with that, and made amends with whatever training and things you may or may not remember that you even did that got you that accreditation or that medal. So it's not to like throw shade on people. It's to say many of our servicemen and military men are some of the most honorable, good-hearted, will help you in a minute people. It's not really about that. It's just to say warfare is all about upsetting your normal to gain something. And if you ask me if this looks like a Lahaina 2.0, it just simply does. It's got all the same things where everybody's focused on the blue house and on the, a DEW and these Photoshop pictures of laser beams when DEWs are invisible. And it just used to be so like frustrating. Like, has anybody just gone and looked at the patent for a DEW? You don't see it. It's not a visible thing.
Tell us everything. That's the Luciferian principles here.
Right. And so and now I'm looking at this and I'm going, so 100-foot wall of water and a tornado of rain and just torrential, just unprecedented winds terraform like the most pristine part of the country.
Yep, it really is. That's why we moved here. I will say for sure there's environmental issues that will be a result of this happening. Just look at the footage coming out of Lake Lure.
Lake Lure, I've heard about Lake Lure. Now I have a friend who says she knows one person in Lake Lure on one side of the lake that was fine, and on the other side of the lake that wasn't fine. So I think it's probably like similar to where you are. It's just kind of like, and that's what I want people to do. Just understand about the human experience. Everybody's is just their own. Like, it's not like anybody who doesn't mention something else is ignoring or underplaying, because how could we possibly know or mention everyone in every situation? We're just sharing our own. The reason I brought Joshua on here tonight is because nobody's going to get closer to the action. Everybody's asking him around the world, like, what's going on in North Carolina? This man right here is literally in the middle of it. Somebody asked earlier, what is a Starlink? Starlink is simply a
Everybody's talking about Starlink, by the way. I mean, it's like Starlink. This is the biggest
Starlink.
advertisement.
Continue.
Everybody's talking about Starlink.
Right, because what is Starlink for the people who don't know? Starlink is an internet service providing service owned by Elon Musk as a derivative of SpaceX. Because when you go to the Starlink website, it's like Starlink is a SpaceX company. We go to space and we toss some satellites out there, and then we give you internet too.
Blanket the Earth with millimeter waves. Yeah.
We blanket the Earth with microwave. Internet for you in an emergency. And I don't even mean to be cheeky because it's literally internet for you in an emergency. But it's all just so like, okay, thank you, but like, what's really going on here? You know, I feel like everybody's like, I get it, I appreciate it, I'm not undermining it, but like, can anybody tell me what's actually going on here? Because everything that we could use, like system, what's the point of infrastructures and systems and federalized rescue efforts if they don't actually help? And what's the point of reporting in the media? And we know, like, nobody on this channel is lost on the honesty in the media, but that's not the point. The point is, what's the point of going on TV to filibuster and, like, slow roll discussing everything about a crisis, knowing that if Trump, and this is my thing, Trump or Kamala or Biden, any one of those three people hop straight on Twitter and say, hey, our country's in crisis. If any private citizens have a helicopter, an airplane, anything that
somebody mentioned this earlier in the feed. They were threatening. The sheriffs were threatening to arrest the pilots if they landed.
Yeah,
that's fact.
That's that. I saw that clip floating around. Then we were talking last night, and in walks the guy who's been contracting for the DoD, who's just helping relief efforts, and his experience is.
About this time, about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning last night. Yeah.
And then what did he say? He said, no. Everybody here has been, court, and that's been for the most part your experience, right? That nobody's turning away help at all. From what you know, from what you've seen, you've heard about it, but have you seen it where you are?
As far as turning away help from the government, you're saying?
No. I'm saying any official deny, because that's the thing. That's another reason I wanted to come on with someone who's actually there, because I've just noticed certain aspects of the conversation bubble louder than the balance, and one of those aspects is the officials are blocking aid from coming in. And I don't mean to say that that's not happening. I just want people to see.
There's been a lot of misinformation. I'll tell you right now. Even today, I mean, my mom sent when I drove by the Starlink, I got a message, and there was reports coming out saying that there was mercenaries that are holding people gunpoint to take their supplies, food, etc. Please keep guns and your gates shut. Have your locks on. Basically these instructions. And I can confirm that's not true around where I'm at. Now, I have heard of stories of people shooting people and threatening to shoot people and things.
Starlink said no. Elon said, oop, y'all said my name. Say my name. Oh, there you go. He's back. Thank you, Elon.
You still there?
I'm here. Okay. A meteor passed by, but go ahead.
Yeah, you need Starlink,
Then
bro.
Then we both have 2 meteors to interrupt. I'm being hella.
If people want to help, if people want to help, honestly, Starlinks would be a great way to help. They're only like $299.
So yeah, we were kind of joking about this earlier, but when we were talking about this last night, we were like, let's see what the upload speed. So I went to the Starlink website while we were talking, and we noticed that they had a banner at the top that said anybody affected by this gets basically a month on us for free, and your equipment is half off. Usually it's about $600 for the modem and the setup fees, and they knocked it down to $300.
Oh, did they lower the price?
$299 is what you said that you saw.
Yeah, that's a good price. Really.
No, it is. It's like when I looked into it back in the day, it was $600. Back like a year ago.
Number one thing I can tell you that everybody has realized as a result of going through this is the lack of communication. Meaning our inability to communicate, even in our own community. Everybody needs to be able to communicate with one another in a community to have an effort that's going to help one another, right?
So if somebody dumped 100 walkie-talkies off and batteries,
we can
rechargeable
right
batteries.
We still need them. I mean, because the roads that they're not rebuilding the roads that just got destroyed. They're only taking what's there and creating a new pass. And I have footage I can send you of just my drive today. I mean, there's stuff that if you aren't paying attention, you will go off the mountain. You're within inches.
Oh, wow.
And so that's what I'm talking about. That's why the side-by-sides are why people are coming in. They're not as wide as vehicles. You can go in other places, right? But they're expanding that and making it wider, fortifying what's there every day. But still, nobody's got walkie-talkies because in Burnsville, the entire supply of walkie-talkies and communication got wiped out in the flood.
Oh.
So imagine this. It's one way because the path's so small. So if I'm going around a curve and I'm in a vehicle that needs to traverse this, and you're in that one because no one communicated with the person who said, "Hey, there's let's let these cars through." You're now having to try to back up in a treacherous area to be able to figure out how to pass one another.
Right. Wow.
That shouldn't be the case.
Ingalls. That was the thing I couldn't remember earlier. The buses, the Ingalls trucks floating.
The Ingalls trucks floating.
So for people who don't know, Ingalls is a big grocery store chain in this general area. Where I go get my water at the mountain, Josh told me, there's an Ingalls right at the base, and I would always fill up. And when my water's in my car, I go to the Ingalls, give me some chips for the drive home, and make sure the water was even and situated, and then hop on the highway and head home. So Ingalls, when we were talking earlier, I had seen the reports of Ingalls being underwater, and I'm like, yeah, wow, a whole grocery store underwater. That's crazy. And Josh was like, bro, not a grocery store.
In North Carolina.
Whoa. I want people to go through the experience I went through. It's not a grocery store. It is a grocery store chain headquarters based in a
distribution to every grocery store.
Yeah, their distribution building to every grocery store. It's the biggest, one of the biggest buildings.
And they're also the biggest pharmacy too.
Right. Yeah, of course, because the grocery store, the Food and Drug Administration just happened to consolidate.
I mean, you can, if you eat healthy, you can find things at Ingalls to eat, but most everything there is still conventional GMO stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You just have to look. If you want some cave-aged Gruyere from Switzerland, you can find it. You just got to know what to look for.
It's going to be $37, but you can find it.
Exactly.
It's going to taste delicious, too.
But, meanwhile, they're injecting people with the jabs and wanting people to get flu shots again.
And people are getting flu shots right next to the meat section in your grocery store.
Yeah, it's like, I don't want live viruses, So I don't even take my children into Ingalls or stores like that. I mean, maybe we'll go in.
Somebody asked, it's underwater. So, yes. So, I want you to, I wish I could just go back and show people the shock that I had when you were first telling me. I said, yeah, I heard about this Ingalls. I said, was it the Ingalls at the bottom of the mountain where the spring is? You were like, no, bro. The Ingalls Distribution Center headquarters, like, the whole grocery store chain, the whole chain, not.
Supply chain.
He said he saw Ingalls 18-wheelers floating.
Yeah,
like you said, your dad.
Hundreds of them.
Who said that?
My dad saw it. He saw it on some sort of news or something on social media, floating Ingalls trailers. And people don't realize, like, Ingalls is, every region has this grocery store chain, right? But Ingalls is like a super center because when you live out in the country or in outside of the city, you've got to have one-stop shops. You
do. Yes, Vita, like we're both in North Carolina. He, however, is in a city that basically flooded. I am not. I'm in a safer location. So we're going live tonight so that for anybody who's just joined, I know some people in England are waking up and they're joining. For any of y'all hearing about what's going on in North Carolina, I'm on with my friend Joshua, who's literally in the mix. He couldn't talk to anybody or even get outside communication. No power, no water, no nothing. Half the town slid down the mountain. He started talking last night. We talked. We got back on. I was just about to hop on live to update everybody on what we spoke on last night. And then I saw you on WhatsApp and you were like, yo, bro, I'm back. So we've been going like, let's go live. So Josh is sharing his perspective on the tragedy that is unfolding that we do believe is being significantly underplayed in terms of the death count, in terms of the storm itself, in terms of the relief effort, in terms of
the aftermath is a problem. It's not even the initial
storm.
Deaths. It's not even the initial the destruction. It's that when you destroy an infrastructure of this many people, and you don't provide outside resources and assistance for a certain period of time,
right.
you will have war. You will have.
Yeah. You will get what you might. You will get the conditions that you create. Put it like.
I mean, everybody's packing. I mean, I mean, there's not anybody that I don't see pretty much with guns on their hips down here.
Right. So I want everybody to understand. We're in North Carolina. It is not an open carry state. It is a concealed carry state if you have a permit. But it's not an open carry state. But does any of that matter in the case of a disaster? Absolutely not. Why? Because everybody's open carrying, and that's how y'all know you don't mess with that dude. And I'm telling you.
By the way, it's kind of like unspoken. Like, we are governing ourselves, right? We are the law. And even when I go into town, like, which we just made it into town after, I can't even remember the days now, but it's like 4 or 5 days of being isolated without any outside resources. The speed limits, they used to pull you over and stuff. People are not respecting speed limits at all.
Yeah.
People are just going. Like, it's balls to the wall, as they say. And the gas station lines have improved. I will say this over the last couple of days, but when I first got out, they're half-mile or longer lines to the gas station. And then Ingalls, I haven't been to Ingalls. Thankfully, I was prepared for my family. I haven't had to even take food from the community. Although I have so many dogs, I go in there and I get, because I have 7 people in my family, that they're giving out 7 hamburgers. I go in, they say, you got 7. Okay, I take 7. Why? Because I have my closest 7 dogs that are part of our pack that live in the house. They're all getting hamburgers, right? And so looking at that, and honestly, they were throwing away a lot of stuff initially too, because they're helicoptering in these supplies. Nobody's coordinating with anyone. They're just like bringing random stuff, and it's stuff that people don't necessarily need.
And it's stuff that you have to refrigerate sometimes.
Refrigerate. Yeah, everybody's food went bad. I mean, there's people who are still being pulled out. There's a private community up at 5,500 feet elevation up the mountain right here from us. As of yesterday, I haven't talked to the search and rescue today about it, but as of yesterday, they still haven't been reached.
Oh, wow. 5,500 people.
Miles and miles and miles and miles and miles is destroyed. It's not like this is like a little road. These are some of the most incredible roads in the country.
They shoot some like commercials on these roads, like
these roads
they shoot like car
incredible.
commercials.
And by the way, going back to what you said earlier, from what I've seen is like it I think this storm was not an act of God in the sense of like but I mean all things are from Him, through Him, and to Him is what the scriptures talk about, right? So when you look at it like that, it's like, okay, all this is going to be work together for the good of those who love and keep the way, right? On the path. And so we're already seeing blessing, and I'm looking around and I'm taking these people who just lost their multi-million-dollar house and escaped with their lives and saw their neighbors' dead bodies floating down the mountain and avalanches and tornadoes that literally come in and take 100 acres of forest and just clip the trees in half. Just
100 acres of forest like this,
and they're all over like that. You look around, there's like hundreds of acres just like, and I didn't see the tornadoes, but I heard them because I went out at 6 a.m. on Friday morning, which was when people were basically dying. Between 6 and 9 and 10, things were really bad. And it was pitch black dark, and like I said, the rain was like I've never seen before, and it was like 3 inches of water on the ground just from the amount of rain that was falling.
Wow.
On the flat ground that I was in, right? Because actually where we're at, we actually are in a rare spot where there's flat ground. And so we were fortunate because, and by the way, there's been very significant floods before in this region. And one was in 1977, national emergency was declared here. And before we bought our house, the first thing I asked was, did this house flood then? And I knew that it didn't. But this storm, everybody around here says, this is the worst storm on record, period. Way worse than 1916. There's a 130-year-old church that this Sunday was going to celebrate in that building its 130th anniversary in that building. That's the bus that's in the building. That building's done, right?
We just, like, for anybody just hopping on at the very, very beginning, I played a video that was a church building over here, one over there, basically floating, if it might have floated from where it was originally at, with a whole bus, like a tour bus, stuck in the side of it, like a doggone cigarette coming out the church's mouth. So I'm looking at this like, and Josh is mentioning that church was about to celebrate its 130-year anniversary.
This Sunday, yeah.
So we're talking
they're all saying, hang on a second. In 130 years of our family's histories in these parts, nothing's ever been touched. All these things that have never been touched just got touched.
Right.
And it was like just in a night. And that was what was so wild about it. How does this happen in one night of rain? That's what my wife wants to know. She knows
right.
we know what's up, right?
Right.
So I think where we're at right now is that we need to continue to bring, real testimony. And we need to know that that this is something that's about to kick off a bigger event, because when we look at first news I got when the Starlink went live was Iran was hitting Israel with hypersonic missiles.
Yeah.
I've been waiting, Chris. You know this too. Ever since Wood Tender back, us hanging out, we've been waiting for this whole Iran thing to erupt.
Yeah,
now.
Bro, Iran has been the chess move that everybody's like, all right, when they click the Iran button, that's when it goes. It's the final bank that's not on the thing. I've been told that there's a whole like Sunni Shiite / Iranian Islamic kind of schism that may or may not be like manufactured. I honestly don't know enough about it to know for sure. I just know that Iran, as Persia, stands as one of the wonders of the world. That's been around since the Persian Empire, and they basically been independent and not necessarily a central bankish up to now. Now that could be part of the story. That's what we've all heard. That could be the cover story. They just as central bank as everybody else. They just telling everybody this to use as justification for them playing that role in this season of the whole story.
I think we're losing you, Chris.
Okay, you're back now. You pause for a second.
Okay, all right.
Back from outer space.
I mean, somebody's talking about the port right now. I once was lost. The port thing is not by coincidence, as we know either.
Oh, you know what that's all about, bro. We hadn't got to talk about that.
Yeah,
I'll forward you what was forwarded to me earlier today of a gentleman who is a longshoreman, a lifelong longshoreman, explaining that the ports have always been U.S. owned, not American owned. And that this is really a coup, in a way, a military coup, being masqueraded as a port. I mean, I'm oversimplifying just to kind of like encapsulate for people. But essentially it is the Navy and Marine Corps forcing the republic and the state, which is the corporation, out of the conversation at the ports, specifically the ports. And he talked about, in the beginning of the video, he talked about how the War of 1812, we didn't win. He's like, go look at this particular treaty, go read the treaty, and go look at the legislation immediately after. And I've had a different lawyer, the guy we were talking about earlier, tell me the same thing. They're like, look at the treaty. Like, when you win a battle, you don't speak like this. This is written from the perspective of a winner giving you permissions and licenses. This word right here means you don't own it. They do.
You don't own it, right?
And so
right.
they're pointing out that our history has been lied to. We know that much. What we're now figuring out is, okay, if it's all a lie, what does each lie mean in its implication? And what we're coming to see with this port crisis, from one gentleman's opinion, who I really do think is speaking to something very valuable, because from what I know about what's happening with the money stuff behind the scenes, to me, I'm like, okay, this makes sense for the port thing. We want triple the pay and no automation. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous because the ask is kind of ridiculous. Not that it should be, but that in the context of what we know the port authorities are willing to go for, just from what the little they've shared about the dynamic dichotomy, the request from the unions and the Teamsters is just absurd. And so I looked at and I mentioned this in this group chat earlier. I go, you guys, if we're negotiating, right? If you're trying to buy my house, right? And my only reason my house is on the market is because I'm trying to sell it, and I want to sell it for $500,000. Let's just use rounded numbers. And you come in and say, I'll offer you $350,000, and I go no. And you go, I'll offer you $450,000. And you go no. And you say, I'll offer you $475,000, and I go, okay, fine. And I'm really trying to sell the house. The night before the sale, I'm not going to go to you and be like, you know what? I want $2.5 million for it. And you can't use movers. You got to move yourself. You see what I'm saying? That type of decision means I wasn't interested in selling the house.
Yeah.
Never mind motive and whatever. You can, I don't believe that we're looking at buffoons. I think we're looking at deceivers that want you to think that they're idiots and incompetent, but they're not. Their motives are just
seizing control, basically.
yes.
Is what you're saying.
Their motives are just different than your motives. So when you say, "Well, why aren't they doing something? People should be. They should be." The reason you feel that way is because your motives and intentions are driven purely to help. Their motives and intentions are not driven for that way. What they want out of the situation is precisely why they're acting that way. Don't just give it off as incompetence, because we are adults here and this is a serious matter.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at this and I'm going, this whole we want triple the pay and no automation, and the night before they're like, or sorry, triple the pay and no additional and fewer automation, and then the night before you're like,
for their job security.
For job security, right? Yeah, in an ever-changing blockchain addicted world, like the job security, right? So then they go the night before where they want the resolution, right? It's like it's the Teamsters, the union, going to the port saying, please pay us this much. Please don't replace our jobs with automations. The night before, you almost theoretically maybe reach an agreement. You go, yeah, you know what? You have to take every computer you use. I mean, I'm being exaggerative, but you have to remove your automation, and we actually want more money.
It'd be like Amazon employees going on strike saying Bezos is implementing too much high-tech stuff, and we're not going to work here anymore and go on strike. Now no one has Prime.
Exactly, but it's not only that. It's like threatening to do that. It's threatening to do that if Jeff agrees to not implement additional AI, and then the night before the decision, changing it to say, in fact, you have to remove all the automation you've installed. It's just an absurdly ridiculous act.
No one's going to agree to that.
No one's going to agree to it. So to me, that says, okay, well then the point wasn't to get a solution, because we're all adults here. Anybody who wants what they want gets what they want. That's like whether you're a thief or just a clever, honest person.
So what they want is they want the port shut down.
Yes,
that's
clear. And what seems to be possibly transpiring in the background is that they, being the U.S. corporation that's owned those ports up to now, is trying to stymie install what the Marines and the Marine Corps and the Navy is trying to enforce under maritime and admiralty jurisdiction with the jurisdictional thing. This longshoreman who was speaking like, listen, y'all not going to really know what's going on, so let me really break it down. And he started off by saying, we didn't win the War of 1812. I know the history books will tell you we did, but they lied. So let's get past it. And then he goes on to say that every shore and every port was an American port. Every port became a U.S. port. And the international trade people agreed to, essentially, they tried to box out what they saw was another land grab. You see what I'm saying? It's like it's all rinse and repeat. And the State Department won. The Republic lost. So since we've been born, we've been dealing with foreign British international company that's masquerading as a government with these actors that don't act well, no matter what color necktie they're wearing. They don't help. They have Donald Trump could take the gold off the walls in one of his apartments and literally help the entire victims with just that value in physically helicopter fuel. Like, I'm telling you, with one tweet, you know how easy it is for Donald Trump to pick up his phone and say, listen, you guys, everybody's been affected, literally everyone. I need anybody who's a patriot who really wants to help somebody to contact this person here. I'm setting up stations in every major city, and I'll donate money, and anybody who's rich can donate something too. Y'all can get off y'all fat asses and donate like me. You know how easy that is to tax write-off, even if you wanted to fake it for the PR, that they don't do? Right? Yep. Never mind. We don't have any more money. Kamala and Biden just.
Well, what they're doing, this is what I see, is that if enough noise is made, which is what's about to happen, we're just talking. We're on the front end of it right now. Even though I feel like we're late to the game, because I've been involved firsthand here, but it's been with no communication. It's as if nothing's going on.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. Good point.
Now it's about to break, and what do they always do? They wait to see if the story's going to stick, right? Well, they can't cover this up. There's no way to cover it up, right? So all they could do is try to go in here and act like they're actually doing something, leading the way.
Mm-hmm.
Even Biden said something about we had already pre-planned the amount of, like, he said that, pre-planned. Like, hang on, how did you pre-plan this, right?
Right, and like as if based on the circumstances of the unprecedented nature of what's going on, you can't just like adjust that pre-plan.
You haven't even seen what's going on yet, because for 2 days, and the worst of it, not a single aircraft flew over us.
Right.
I mean, we're used to seeing aircraft every day fly at some point.
Right, yeah.
So somebody's flying over, right?
American Airlines, Spirit, somebody.
Right. Nobody flew over to assess the damage in our region at all for multiple days. And when the helicopters started to arrive, they were 100% private. I mean, it's been incredible. I mean, it must be incredible to have those kind of resources to just be able to fly in aid, for fun. Right, and
but here's the thing, bro. Consider it like people who have a boat, people who have a $200,000 Maserati. Helicopters are expensive, but from people who own like a thing or two, who might have had a gig or two, who might know a person or two, it's approachable. My big thing is, and I know 2 people with helicopters, and I was like, rotary radio, like anybody can't. I wish I could fly a helicopter. I'd be right there. Right. Yeah. But what I feel like to me that was so captivating by when you first started, we talked last night, was that your takeaway was that even though there's tragedy, the humanity is speaking louder than both the government and the tragedy. Uh-oh, you're covering your mic. Okay, go say that again. People can what?
I can just tell people are feeling the Holy Spirit, like the unifying spirit, the Ruach, right? Mm-hmm. These are people who were not feeling that with their neighbors before this happened. Right. So that connectivity, you can't take that. It says in the scriptures, we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of testimonies that are being shared right now, and it's like iron sharpening iron. There's a lot of iron that's being sharpened right now. And I think it's actually really vital that this happens, because what we're about to encounter is, I think, cataclysmic at a scale that's like Western North Carolina all over the place, right? Because if they can spark it one place,
they can do it anywhere. And if the breakdown trickles out, then hit LA, hit Chicago, hit New York, hit Austin, hit Miami, hit Denver, hit Seattle, and that's the whole. That's like 7 storms, 7 natural events or unnatural events. Shutting down
the entire eastern seaboard's port system is going to affect everyone.
Right.
And have any more of these weather phenomenons that are going to happen, that's also going to play a factor. But I mean, October leading up to November, of course, we know that the election cycle is just part of the show and the
right. For those of y'all who may not know, Joshua and I are very post-political, we call it. Apolitical, post-political. I was never super political. I don't know if you were, but we have moved past that. We moved past even bothering to care about the frauds that we don't even need to vote for. And I don't mean to offend people who do vote or who, a lot of people in this area are very much Trump lovers. I have a lot of friends who are fans of Trump. I don't hate y'all for that. I don't mock you for it. I think if I had to pick between 2 evils, I would obviously pick the lesser of 2 evils, but that's the whole point of the dance, right? Is to give you 2 evils, one that's incredibly not a good choice and one that's clearly the choice they want you to choose that's also not a good choice. The choice is to actually make choose a different quiz. You're not forced to participate in the choice.
So what's interesting is that, every Bible-believing Christian, not every, but most, are pro-Trump.
Yeah, the Venn diagram is like 97.99%.
Right, most. And they support Israel, which,
of course,
I'm not in support of what they call the nation-state of Israel, right? And
in terms of the state, the people, sure, but the
people, of course.
Yeah, of course, the people.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
The state.
I mean, I actually had a business meeting with someone who flew back to Israel on Wednesday, the day before this happened.
Well, yeah, that's right. You were telling me on the thing.
I was in Nashville, and he's flying back to war. Meaning he's not even at war. He's an investor and stuff, and he's flying back to his they just blew up a bunch of people with pagers and whatever, you know.
Right.
So they happened right when he flew out, and he's heading back, and I'm looking at this and saying things are heating up. And I told Gabrielle, my wife, that, you know, we've been being prepared, but every time I go to Whole Foods or Earth Fare or Trader Joe's, or I was constantly over the last 3 weeks before this happened buying extra, because I knew that something was coming. I felt it.
Mm-hmm.
I felt it in me. I just didn't know it was going to come like it just did.
Yeah,
and
I know.
Like our area, no one knew about it in a sense, and all of a sudden, everybody knows about it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole reason people move there is because no one knew about it. Keep that in mind.
Yeah.
This is podunk, bougie podunk, because it is the outskirts, right? It is not the city where they are, but it's like prime earth where millionaires move into the area to get away from everybody. So when you have that, and then 30-minute drive down, you have a giant city, and even closer drives are slightly smaller cities, and all of that is just washed out with no sanitation. To me, I'm listening to you were talking earlier, and I know I'm hopping around, but you mentioned something else that stuck out to me. You said with no water pumps in Asheville, keeping in mind, y'all, Asheville is the bigger, entirely very liberal core of the hardest hit place. It's a mountain city in the middle of this otherwise conservative base, where I would clearly say there's way more conservative people, right? If this is 400,000 people in the general area, 300,000 of them are conservative, for sure, and probably, you know, another 25 within the city limits too. It's just Asheville is known to be that hippie kind of like lefty, artsy fartsy, crunchy granola. There's a zillion vegan restaurants, and everything has a rainbow flag in every single restaurant. It's that building, or sorry, it's that city. So where this gentleman is located is hopefully not stuck between a meteorite and an asteroid as the Death Star moves in front of our conversation. But he's located a slight bit north of that, in the outskirts of a city known as Burnsville. So he may or may not, he'll probably hop back on if the internet maintains, unless Elon hit the button. But I think I wanted him to come on because I think that it's important for people to catch the story as close to a source of the perspective as possible. I'm just learning about this. When I was driving the other day and I did my live, I hadn't talked to Joshua yet, but I had just been hearing some conversations, and I'm going, okay, so I'm pretty sure, Josh, if you hop back on and I happen to miss it and y'all see Collaboratives join, just let me know and I'll hop them back on. But I happen to see a couple, just some posts about it. People were calling and asking if I was okay, and I kind of just slowly kind of figured out that rain thing that was like windy and rainy and a bunch of leaves was on the ground when I woke up the next day, for me was fine. Power was fine. Internet went out for like an hour and came right back on. For me, it was fine. For him and his dogs and his family and his city, it was absolutely not. So, I mean, it was fine for their individual sake, but not for the greater sake of his town. So, him and several thousands of others like him. And when I say several, I mean literally add a comma or two and multiple zeros to any number the TV is telling you. And that's more likely what the true number is about. So, thank God my buddy and his family and his dogs are good. But now you're in a position, I knew the thing probably kicked you off, but you'll hop
I don't
back
know
on.
what, last night, I don't know what happens, but we got kicked off last night, and I'm not sure if the
I just think
Starlink off.
No. I don't think it's that. I mean, it's back on. I just think that, it switched satellites. Somebody's spaceship flew in front of it. I don't know. Like, pick a reason. Maybe, they had to redivert the same Starlink satellites to hit that cloud formation out in the Gulf again. So, who knows? But I'm glad to have you back, because I do think that, at least for a little, we don't have to go forever, but at least for a bit, I want people to, you talked about, so again, I'm giving people multiple perspectives, because we have a lot of people who I've seen in the comments that are like, we're going to take over, man, and like the earth, Mother Nature is going to make the wrongs right again. And I want y'all to know that Josh is a living testimony to that sentiment. You're preaching to the choir with that because he said that to me for years. I'm like, but the government, Josh. He'd be like, yeah, but we're going to be fine. God's going to take care of it. You're going to be fine. I'm like, what are you doing right now, Josh? He's like, I'm delivering a baby. 1 second. Hold on. Wait. Oh, there we go. So go ahead, Chris. Hold on. What was that? Cutting the cord. This is this man. The whole reason I know about the pure water that we get out the ground is because I came back to North Carolina one time from when we lived in LA and we reconnected. And he's like, bro, I got to tell you about the spring, bro. Come with me. We're going to take it right up to the spring. We hopped in your Sprinter and we went up to the spring. We almost crashed. Remember that? We almost died on the way back. We almost died on the way back.
Truly. Yeah, we did.
We got in this crazy, he had to slam on the brakes. The whole car was like, we were like,
on the highway, on a 4-lane highway, we had a car that had crossed the highway, was sitting head on in rain, pitch black rain. Yeah. We were driving like 70 miles an hour in a Mercedes Sprinter. We were all having a good time, and we literally I swerved at 70 miles an hour to miss this thing that was in the middle of the road, and like saw our lives flash before our eyes together, didn't we?
We did, and the whole time we were like, did that just happen? Like, I didn't just snap and just imagine. Like, it was wild.
Brain's gone.
And because it was like we were driving, so it all happened so quick, and it was like...
It was supernatural.
It was supernatural. Is the spring okay? So the answer to that is a resounding probably not. This is what I know. I don't know if I told you the story because I forget if it had happened before we last talked. But Josh told me about this spring. The spring is in Black Mountain, North Carolina. This is a city slightly south, slightly east of where he is. But it is close to Asheville. It's probably the next biggest city east of Asheville. Or maybe Swananoa, but between Swananoa and Black Mountain.
Well, Black Mountain's probably bigger than Swan, but Swananoa and Black Mountain are basically the same thing. I mean, when you look at it.
Exactly. When you're really there, you're just driving in the street.
Yeah.
Now the road times changing.
Now we're Black Mountain, and of course these are areas that had a lot of money, a lot of affluence, and a lot of resources, and a lot of destinations that people would go to for great fare, beer. The culture, festivals, all that stuff.
So maybe I've seen this thing about this battle in Denver. It might be because that's where the headquarters of all the button pushing is. But we talked that first day. For the person asking, the spring was this beautiful freshwater, maybe 100-year-old aquifer spring, just spewing probably like a gallon every 5 seconds. It would pump out. Like, you could probably get a gallon in about 5 or 6.
I would say probably a gallon every 2 seconds.
A gallon every 2 seconds of water gushing out of the ground constantly, 24/7, 365. I've been there at 3 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon getting water.
Yeah.
In the winter, in the summer, in the snow, in the rain, and all of the above. Every time I'm there, I meet the nicest people on earth. I call it the water people because everybody knows where the good water spot is. So everybody's like, oh, you know where the good water spot is, so you're coming to get the good water. You about that life. You about that life.
And by the way, when you go there, you're also meeting people who are made of the same water because if you're drinking it, you actually are drinking structured, living, raw water from primordial source.
Right, inside the ground
you
for like
with
hundreds
one
of
another because you're made of that crystalline, you get the same crystalline structure in you.
Yeah.
Making up your blood.
Exactly. So this was a place that my daughter and my daughter had been asking me for probably 6 months. Dad, when you go to the mountain again, I want to go next time. And I'm always like, cool, but I don't want to bring a kid. It's kind of like a lot of cars that go through there. I can get 20 more gallons if I don't have your car seat in the car. It's just all these like things. So I was like, all right, fine, you can come with me this time. I also usually just get up there by myself and I'll live stream as I'm driving or something, but I don't usually take my bigger camera. I took my camera this time. I set it up, I recorded, I got all these angles with the spring and all this. It was like after the rain, so the golden hour was there. It was nice. It was literally perfect filming conditions because it was overcast still, but not raining. Perfect softbox lighting. Never in a million years did I think that would be the last time.
We watched that night.
Say what?
One night. You would never, in one night, it'd be watched
in one night. So this was on Wednesday night. we were filling up. I filled up 125 gallons the last time. The last probably 20 gallons of me filling it up. My daughter was like she was my lid carrier. She would hold all the caps, and then when I was finished, she'd put the cap back on. But I would have to come put it on harder because the 4-year-old can't really get the cap on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, but she was so proud, and we met tons of people there. She played with some kids that we met there at the spring that day. And it was just this whole thing that, looking back on it, knowing that 24 hours, 48 hours later, I saw a post saying, hey, I have friends, or I know of people trapped in Black Mountain, North Carolina. 100 people trapped in a mountain. Please help. And I saw this post in the evening, and I remember going, oh crap, I bet that's close to where we were. I heard something about Montreat being underwater. I literally get on the Montreat exit when I go to that spring. Like, oh my goodness!
By the way, there's a lithium spring in Montreat that would probably have gotten wiped out. The lithium spring.
Even is that not a mine but a spring?
Well, no, lithium actually. If people have depression and stuff like that, if you drink lithium water, it can get rid of that.
Oh wow. So
so it's not like a polluted thing. It doesn't taste like Black Mountain water. Like the water you want to drink on the daily. My light just went out. I want to say the water you want to drink daily is. I'll be back in a second. I think my battery's getting up. Let me just cut the car off.
Elon Musk hit the button. I'm just playing. I'd be talking about Starlink. I'm happy he's got Starlink because the least we can hear from him. So the spring, I'll finish while he's hopping back on. The spring where he's talking is you can get lithium toxicity, but what he's saying is you drink it only in certain conditions. He said the water you want to drink on the daily is the water at the, other water than the lithium spring. But lithium springs are a great source of mineral. That's the whole thing about these mountain waters, is that they're chock full of minerals. So you don't want a ton, but you want it in isolated moments if you're dealing with something. And we go to this thing on Wednesday. We're filling up the final 20 gallons, and I feel like it's starting to rain again. I'm like, all right, it's starting to rain. We finish. It takes like an hour and a half to get all the water. We kind of let some other people cut in line in front of us. So we were filling up so much. Most people bring up like 5 or 10, 20 gallons, maybe 10 at the most. Usually, we kind of do the most because we're coming from farther. Most people don't drive 2 hours to this water. It's mostly just the locals. Although I have met people who have driven up from Florida and even further to come to this one spring because of how notable it was. That's why I'm saying this area is not just this random. It's a very significant area in North Carolina. So 48 hours, I think 2 or 3 days later, I see a post saying trapped on this roof. I go and I look at the address. They give the address. I look at the address where they're trapped. And when I tell you the mountain road is going like this and it kind of curves, and then there's a little curve and there's a road that goes off from the curve, and just before the curve is the spring. So you're going up the road. The spring I stop on is right here. And then just around the river bend is the address of what was posted on social media on a lot of different pages of this. I forgot the actual Glory Farm, something 129. I forgot the address. Y'all saw the post of the lady saying, hey, 100 people stranded in Black Mountain, North Carolina. I was 100 feet from where that address was the day before it happened. The day before the thunderstorm, and at least 2 or so days before I saw that post. I did call the number on that post, and I did reach out to the person, and they got back to me and said, hey, that was actually my sister. The good news is my post went viral, and within an hour, the lady who was pregnant, because it said 100 people stranded and one lady's about to go give birth. The lady who was pregnant got airlifted out. Some private pilot saw it, flew up, got her out, and turned around in front of us. So we were filling up so much. Most people bring up like 5 or 10, 20 gallons, maybe 10 at the most. Usually, we kind of do the most because we're coming from farther. Most people don't drive 2 hours to this water. It's mostly just the locals. Although I have met people who have driven up from Florida and even further to come to this one spring because of how notable it was. That's why I'm saying this area is not just this random. It's a very significant area in North Carolina. So 48 hours, I think 2 or 3 days later, I see a post saying, trapped on this roof. I go and I look at the address. They give the address. I look at the address where they're trapped. And when I tell you the mountain road is going like this and it kind of curves, and then there's a little curve and there's a road that goes off from the curve, and just before the curve is the spring. So you're going up the road. The spring I stop on is right here. And then just around the river bend is the address of what was posted on social media on a lot of different pages of this. I forgot the actual, it's Glory Farm, something 129. I forgot the address. Y'all saw the post of the lady saying, hey, 100 people stranded in Black Mountain, North Carolina. I was 100 feet from where that address was the day before it happened. The day before the thunderstorm, and at least 2 or so days before I saw that post. I did call the number on that post, and I did reach out to the person, and they got back to me and said, hey, that was actually my sister. The good news is my post went viral, and within an hour, the lady who was pregnant, because it said 100 people stranded and one lady's about to go give birth. The lady who was pregnant got airlifted out. Some private pilot saw it, flew up, got her out, and turned around and basically coordinated a relief effort to get all those people off the mountain. But I can tell you from having just been there a week ago today, that place is like that. It's just like the mountain comes down, right? There's a road, and then the mountain keeps going down, right? So you're on that road. It's flat, but it's kind of like not perfectly flat. It's a mountain road. Any destabilization, there's houses all up and in those hills, right? So any sort of destabilization of the road, people are just stuck with no power, no refrigerator, no gas, most likely, if it was either flooded or their propane tanks, because most people in that part of the country don't have like gas lines way up into the mountains. They have propane tanks that they house in their backyard or somewhere on the property that they get filled. That's not everybody, but a lot of people do. So we're looking at something that I do believe is unfolding to be something much bigger than I think any of us realize. And I'm someone near and dear to the conversation because I was literally just in the affected area the day before it happened. I don't live there, but I was there to have the memory of the place be so, just for the whole situation and the catastrophe of it all to be such a near miss with my daughter. Keeping in mind, when we left the mountain, we were driving through what was the beginning of the hurricane. We didn't know we were leaving. We were leaving the mountain at like 8. It was after dark, like right as the sun had already set, and it was pretty much dark. So we're talking like 7:38 or so p.m. We're pulling out to get back to drive a 2-hour drive back home with my 4-year-old and me and 120 gallons of water. And it's just torrential downpour, not directly at the spring, but a little into our drive. We just hit this crazy rain. It's like, wow, the rain is nuts. Now, I didn't realize that I'm looking at the beginning, daily Zafriza 1,000% God's timing. But I never realized I was driving through the beginnings of what would become this situation. It was just kind of like, we deal with rain. It's North Carolina, it rains. It's like not a big deal. We're heading into the mountains, into rainy season in October anyway. So it's kind of like whatever. And it didn't hit me until the amount of people kept reaching out asking if I was okay. And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. And then other people, yeah, I'm good. And then eventually me and my wife were like, you good? She's like, yeah, my dad called me today asking if I'm good. My so-and-so, my grandma. I'm like, now that you mention it, I got all these texts and like random signal and random telegram. So I'm like, okay, what's going on? And I hop online and I happen to see some story updates. And the reason, I don't know if Josh will hop back on, and I'll wrap it up pretty soon, but the one thing that I want to say is this. I've seen a lot of people ask, and people have come today and asked me, hey, what's the deal with this, with the lithium mine? Not the lithium spring, but the lithium mine. What is going on, Afika? I was talking to Jennifer Millis yesterday, And she was like, my friend Afika. Da, da, da. I was like, oh yeah, I know the dude. He was like, we're reaching out to me. We gonna connect. But I know that there is a story brewing that I see gaining a lot of traction on the internet that relates to the lithium mine that's within 70 miles of Asheville. And I'm using air quotes, but it's probably true. I don't think that that's a false statement. I just think 70 miles is pretty long, especially when you're dealing with the mountains. And I think that I want to make people aware of the situation, but not induce or promote fear. And I want to not sensationalize that which should not be sensationalized, but at the same time accurately reflect that which is sensational. So the two most developing stories are the Spruce Pine issue quartz mine and the Kings Mountain lithium mine. So backing up about a year and a half or so, I'm hanging out with my homeboy. He's hanging out with his girlfriend, who's now his fiance. And she's talking about how she grew up outside of Kings Mountain in Bessemer City. Bessemer City is these are all just small suburbs of Charlotte. A bit west, right? Now, Kings Mountain is definitely a mountain, but it's more like compared to like the Appalachian Mountain or compared to Mount Mitchell, where Joshua was at. Mount Mitchell is like 6,000 feet. Kings Mountain is like 600 feet. You see what I'm saying? So it is a mountain, but it's like you hike it when you want like a good workout. Mount Mitchell is like you hike it when you're like a hiking expert training for Everest and you're trying to level up. So it's just a whole different scale and scope of mountain. But the North Carolina Western Appalachian Trail is several miles, obviously 70 or so. I haven't done the true calculations, but it's pretty far away from the heavily affected areas. Meaning anything is possible, but I would take whatever fear dial that might exist with a lithium mine being destabilized because of this storm, and I would dial that one, at least for the moment, down. Now, the quartz mine is a different situation because that's literally right in the epicenter of the storm. If you ask me, the implications won't be felt necessarily right away because anybody buying any sort of phone or electronic device within the next year or 2 or 3 is probably buying it using a semiconductor that had a quartz clocking mechanism that may or may not even be from pine spruce in its development cycle for years, at least 2, 3, 4, if not more, before we get to the semiconductor phase, before it gets to the like chip manufacturing phase, before it gets to the phone manufacturing phase, before it gets to the distribution phase, before it gets to your hand. So it's not to say that there's nothing to it. It's simply to say I've been doing this internet truther thing for a minute, and what I tend to notice is that the pattern is that guns are jumped, meaning we see a series of dominoes, and it's kind of like, you know, okay, things are going to get worse, but like how quickly, how rapidly, so everybody's anticipating. And it's like, you know, a lot of people think it's going to get worse, and then you have your whole group of people who's like, no, things are getting better. Oh no, we're ascending. And I don't mean to mock that. I'm just saying, maybe we're ascending, but it's going to get worse before it gets better. It's like if you ascend in any sort of like martial art or military ranking or something like that, like they put you through worse things before you get that other medal. You see what I'm saying? So maybe we'll have a medal called Enlightened Human Being in 2030. But it'll probably require some things of us going through that to truly garner that medal in a metaphorical sense. So what about the random? Oh yeah, I saw that John Connor, that random water spout that killed the AI developer in his yacht. You know, it's war. He's like, the locals understand this is war. The locals get it. The bigger conversation just is slow to catch up. So, I'm sorry, Mike Lynch and his family. My heart goes out to people affected by this. I don't know why he was targeted, but it's obviously targeting. You said, CNN had a piece on Today that said the court's mind flooding will significantly slow down AI development. That's a complete lie. See, this is what I think happens. I think even at the media layer, we're dealing with very heavy compartmentalization. It just happened. You can't tell me that y'all snatch raw rocks out the ground and a year later, it's like building computers that are managing AI. I don't think it's going to slow down AI development at all because of what Josh was saying earlier. There isn't an industry on Earth that's ubiquitous like the world, like electronics are into the world, that rely on any one precious resource coming from any one location. It's just unsafe to do that from a business standpoint, never mind a controlling the world standpoint. He said that it has a pure type of quartz that is in high-end equipment and high-end gear. Is AI mining using high-end computers? No, they're using your old Pentiums and Dells that are being repurposed so that they're not just melted and turned back into the silicone wafers that they once were. It's not exactly. Much of AI is already built in waiting. As far as I can tell, I've seen the patents for AI doing all its dirty work on your own existing devices and body cells. So the AI is more about this kind of aggregate layer using bootstrapping technologies where they're really just kind of using other devices outside of their normal purpose to relay information that your cellular code is processing. And they red herring everybody with shortages and the way that the technology trajectory is being discussed publicly. So obviously Joshua got cut off. We don't need. It's already been a pretty long conversation. Cassia is right. She said Sabrina Wallace. Sabrina's work I think has helped me a lot. All her whole channel's all on Odyssey. She's not even really on YouTube. I think people repost her, but I know she only concentrates on Odyssey. She's just shown the patent and the application of what clearly are weather, and not specifically weather, but just electromagnetic warfare. That's kind of her bag, networking and information systems and how they coalesce into this global information grid architecture moving forward. That is why I think many people in this conversation have rightly presumed, assumed, inferred, without any hard proof or evidence other than my two eyeballs, that this clearly was not a normal natural phenomenon. This, like, the news is like, again, I catch clips in here and there, but I see Biden speaking of tragedy, and again, I'm not belittling the tragedy in Florida. I'm not belittling the tragedy in Georgia or South Carolina or Tennessee. I'm simply saying, as far as scales, as far as I can tell just from what I've seen, North Carolina, particularly Asheville, seems to have gotten literally the worst of the worst. Now, my personal family's land that we own, we just haven't built on it yet, it's just north of that, and that's directly in the path. I honestly don't know what it looks like. I have heard back from our neighbor that he's fine. People on the other side of the mountain didn't make it. It looks like hell in a war zone up here. But they can access the next city over, which is maybe like a 20-minute drive normally. They have access to that city. He did mention 4-wheelers and ATVs, but when I asked him about our property, he said, I haven't been over to y'all's property, but if I had to guess, most of those trees are gone. So we had a property that's probably 60-70% wooded. I guess we got more prairie now than we initially thought. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if it's just firewood for days or it blew over or it looks the same. I honestly don't know. So I'm kind of like in limbo with us. But to us, it's kind of like, well, we didn't personally lose anything other than maybe a fence and, a do not trespass sign and some things. I have so many more thoughts, but I simply don't want to belabor it. It is 4 a.m. The little ones will be awake very soon. I just want people to know that if you're hearing about this story from around the world, I will save this live. But if you're hearing about this story from around the world, just understand that As of today, October 2nd, or, technically 4 hours and 6 minutes into October 3rd, 2024, it is about a week after a giant tornado and hurricane ripped through the mountains at 6,000 feet elevation, casting water that was sloshing, so much rain that the water table built up to 100 feet or more, honestly, in some cases. Buses, buildings, churches floating down, the whole church building floating down the street. In some cases, right? In some places. Many families displaced. Not a tremendous amount of media coverage. And the media coverage I've seen is highlighting, it's underplaying and it's highlighting things that aren't as significant as they're making it out to be, and underplaying the things that are. It's also coalescing relief efforts into all the major ones that, are the popular ones. Now, this is what I'll also say, knowing people who have having personal family, family through marriage, people, pilots doing first response. There are plenty of private rescue teams, tons of them, helping, being very helpful, being the only help that most people have and will get. I'm not saying that there isn't contractors and federal contractors coming to help. I do believe that that's the case. To what extent they're turning people away, it's hard to say, because at least in the conversations I've had from people on the ground, that hasn't happened. I honestly do believe that it probably has happened in certain locations. It's hard to know whether that was based on the protocol and safety and instability of that one location, and that one official just made a judgment call that somebody felt some type of way about, and that went viral, and now we think officials are, and it was just one or two isolated events, or 10 or 20 isolated events out of 2,000. I don't know. All I'm trying to do is get out of the way with opinion, at least for this conversation, and kind of be like, yo, here's what's up. Yeah, someone said 100-foot tall mudslides where mountain walls are gone. Yes, that's what Josh, my buddy who was just on, was telling me earlier. Now, keep in mind, we were talking for like 45, 50 minutes, and I was like, bro, we need to just hop on the live. Let's just go on. But he was telling me in our call before that he's seen 30 or so foot walls of water in sections of the city, but someone who he's kind of connected with, the locals, where over on his side of the place, he's like pointing at 100-foot tsunamis at the same time as tornadoes. Let me tell y'all, this does not happen in the mountains. Not tsunamis, not tornadoes. It simply just isn't a thing. So I honestly think he keeps seeming convinced that we're at the beginning of something big. I'm inclined to think that might be true, because even if nothing else happens, the cleanup in the infrastructure right now is already bad. He's already said that there's towns of 5,000 people, 5,500 people, and nobody's heard from them for a week, and they have no way down. And unless people have private helicopters or, a Chinook, he did say that Chinooks were flying in, there's simply no way to help them. I've seen reports of bodies floating in the streets, and the smell and the stench of like the animals, just never mind just the people for a second, the animals and all the livestock in that general area. Almost every other person had a farm, personal if not industrial. Plenty of cattle ranchers out there, plenty of I don't say plenty, but a couple hog ranchers, plenty of gardeners, people growing ginseng. Apparently ginseng grows super well in those mountains. So when we bought our property, my homie who lives up there was like, hey bro, I'll give you the pro tip. Ginseng. It's like the Asian markets, they love it. They come straight to you, they buy it. It's crazy. You can make a killing in the winter growing ginseng. I'm like, word, I'm learning all the hustle. And now it's like, this was our discussion last night. Thankfully, the Starlink held up. We had a great 2-hour conversation before whoever hit the button, or the asteroid flew in front of the doggone spaceship, Starlink relay. I don't know. It just cut off. And, I'll talk to Joshua again when I can. But that's how the conversation went. And I just wanted to share that with you. So we'll be updating you with more. I'll definitely come back with more as I get more info. And I'm thankful that I'm safe and my family's safe. I thank you for everybody who's reached out with concerns. If anybody's interested in helping, feel free to reach out to me and I'll be happy to connect you with what I can. But this is really a time where I think people can step up and really help and help one another. And to that end, I do believe that we have the ability to overcome, individual trauma. I'm not one of those people like, the world is going to be a better place. I don't know. From an Earth standpoint, it seems like it would, but from a human condition standpoint, I'm not sure. I don't know. I know that most people in the state are fine. Many people in the state in the affected areas, which are relatively isolated, are not fine. There's a city, Chimney Rock. Maybe you've seen the posts going around. That city, they said yesterday, the city council meeting or whoever said they was going to level the whole city. It's right next to Lake Lure, North Carolina. These places mean a lot to me because I went to summer camp there my whole childhood, Camp Lurcrest. So I'm sitting there like, wow, that whole, these pockets of places that I know are just no more. And I don't think that the television media or most of the internet media is doing a true justice to nuanced adult rational thinking and not emotional triggers. Take, for instance, stand down orders. We're being told that we're not allowed to help and we're being told to stand down. Now, is that happening to those people who went live and said it was happening to them? Probably. Could there be agent provocateurs stirring up the drama, saying that that's happening and it isn't? Yes, there could be. That's clearly part and parcel for what has happened in the past. Do I think that that's what's going on here? I don't actually think that that's what's going on. I do think that those people were telling the truth. I, however, do think that those situations were pretty isolated because when I talk to others, they tell me the opposite story. And in fact, it seems that more places, we've had an overwhelming amount of support from civilians and just private folk. And some of them are defying the orders of the authorities because they have family members that need help. Okay. So I'm just going with what I'm hearing. And I don't necessarily think that, I think that the thing people have to understand is that we're not dealing with an organized, uniform response effort. We're dealing with 750 different splintered groups with different interests. I'd say the overwhelming majority of them are interested in helping people. So it's not like a bad thing or nothing. But that's not necessarily the case for all of the parties involved. So don't let the bad decisions of a few bad players at one random city and there's nowhere even heard of it before the hurricane town, apply to every good person in every other town. The one thing that I also want to say about Asheville, North Carolina, it's a unique geopolitical region because the city of Asheville is a very liberal city. It is very beautiful there, and the people are great. I love going to Asheville, but it's also a very blue, quote unquote, blue city. The immediate areas and the entire surrounding areas, both in Tennessee, Virginia, Georgia, and North Carolina, that are just outside of Asheville, are the opposite of that. You see, they're incredibly red. They are very much Trump country. And again, this isn't political, so there are wonderful people. And in fact, I've met most wonderful people inside of Asheville and plenty of wonderful people outside of Asheville. Our family's land that we invested in to get the heck up out of what they was trying to do in the cities is up that way. We've only heard very little about how our land is doing. We're a few hours north of where the worst of the worst is. And we did hear from one neighbor that it's bad, but it ain't as bad as Asheville, basically. But I don't know, y'all. Halloween is a few weeks away. Halloween is essentially 3 weeks away. Nope. 3.5 weeks away. And if it's already been 1 week and nobody's even heard from that one city up on the mountain with 6,000 people in it, God help them. Let's all help them. I'll help them. Anybody got a helicopter? I'm serious. You got a helicopter? Come pick me up. We go get everybody. I can lift. I just want to help. I just know that it's hard to do that when you don't know how to fly a helicopter. and you don't have $1 zillion to toss at the problem. I know plenty of politicians and millionaires who do, but they seem to be preoccupied with trying to fix it for you instead of equipping you to fix it for yourself or your community. So in that regard, I'll let my mouth and my opinion stay to myself for now, and I'll come back to you guys when I have a bit more. Thank you guys for checking this out. Feel free to subscribe. I'm going to definitely keep you updated. This is not even what this channel is normally discussing, but it's too actionable. It's too important, I think, not to kind of divert some attention away from my normal subject matter to what's going on here. If I do, when I do make it out to essentially where ground zero is, I will be sure to share what I see and what I find. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll be in touch.